Hello, everybody, and welcome to Friends of the Force, a Star Wars podcast. Welcome to the year 2021. I am your host, Brad Whipple. Happy New Year. So happy you're all joining us today on the show because we are talking about Star Wars, the High Republic. The day has finally come. We are taking our first steps into a larger world. And joining me on those first steps is none other than Sarah Haas. Sarah, glad you made it into the new year.
Oh, me too. Me too. It was a long road, but we got here.
You know, we're just trying our best, honestly. And that's all we can really do. How was your holiday season?
My holiday season was very low key. We kept it chill. And I wish the holiday season were longer so I got to listen to Christmas music longer, but I'll live. There will be more Christmases.
It is true. It was a little different this year, but I got a couple good Star Wars goodies this year for Christmas. Yeah.
Nice.
Well, folks, it's been a weird week. It's been a little bit of a rough week. We are recording this on the Friday before you're listening to it, and it's been a tough week for sure. You know, I think as Star Wars, you know, it's something that we can go to and escape from the problems of the world and kind of take a moment to breathe a little bit. But I also think there's an importance of addressing issues when they happen and when things in our world affect real people, because as much as you can escape into a fictional reality of a space movie, it is also a privilege to do so, and some people don't always have that option. And the events of this week are honestly just terrible. Yeah, overall, Sarah, it's just not been a great week for our country whatsoever.
No, yeah. Democracy is fragile, and we really all need to do our best to keep it moving forward. You know, my best piece of advice is like when the news feels particularly heavy and we're doom scrolling and doom scrolling and doom scrolling on every possible media platform, is to just reminder to take a moment for yourself, remember to drink water, get a bite to eat, and take a step away. If that means, you know, just taking a quick shower, taking a short nap, like, make sure to take care of yourselves. And I hope that you all took care of yourselves this week, because I think that, especially when we're far away, is what we can do in the moment to care for ourselves, truly.
Yeah, what happened this weekend in Washington, D.C. is honestly just one of the worst things I've seen in my own life. And it's still hard to wrap my head around, but we don't support that here whatsoever on the podcast. We don't support that group, those ideals, what they stand for. It's fascist. It's dangerous to our democracy. Like Sarah said, democracy is fragile, and we have to do everything in our power to protect the one thing that our country is built around. I would say if you support those who barged into our congressional chamber and did what they did, this isn't the podcast for you, and you shouldn't be listening to it, because we're very vocal about these things, and we feel, you know, it's our duty to bring it up and just let you know that that's not what we tolerate around here, and we won't stand for it, basically. So we want to speak our minds before we talk about this book, because it's been on everybody's mind this week, and it's really hard to get away from it and to ignore that it's happening.
Yeah. And while I definitely think it's important to take care of ourselves and, you know, spend time on ourselves during this time, it doesn't mean we get to just run away from it, because these are real problems that are going to continue to happen to some degree. Because now that this has occurred, you know, it's kind of becoming a part of our political system. Anyway, American politics aside, take care of yourselves, no matter where you are in the world. If you haven't gotten a bite to eat today, or drink some water, or
please do so. Please hydrate.
Brush your hair, or, you know, done something for yourself today, please do that, because you deserve it. That's the 2021 energy you need right now, is self-care and kindness to yourself. So that's the energy we're going into Light of the Jedi with.
Yeah. We're here to bring you the fun now. And again, with all of that aside and just letting you know where we stand as a podcast, now we want to take you on a little adventure 200 years sent before the Phantom Menace. and discuss Light of the Jedi by Charles Soule. It's the very first book alongside Justina Ireland's A Test of Courage, which just released on January 5th. Sarah, it's so crazy to think that we have come all the way from Project Luminous to the release date of the High Republic. It used to be so mysterious, and now it is in our hands. We are reading it. People are reacting to it. People are finally starting to get into Star Wars publishing, which has always felt like such a niche community for so long. And it's becoming more mainstream in a way, which I'm just like super thrilled about. It's not as much
Star Wars
of a
books.
it's not as much as like a small nerds club anymore, and I think that's always a good thing for publishing. The more attention it has, the better. I think Kevin Scott's comic sold like 200,000 issues, which is like really incredible. That's like a huge accomplishment right there. So I mean, this thing is launching with a lot of attention, a lot of positivity, and I think people from all ends of the spectrum are reacting great to it. And I will say, this book and this era, I promise you, it has something for everybody. I promise you it does. And I know there's a lot of hard feelings, with how the Skywalker saga ended and just some handling around certain things. But let me tell you, put your faith in Star Wars publishing, because they have a very consistent track record, and they've done some very, very great things and pushed out some very, very awesome stories from amazing and diverse people. And I'm just so excited that we are finally here.
If you want to think about it in the timeline of things, Brad, from the announcement of Project Luminous to now, this book being out, that has been the duration of our friendship.
Wow. It has.
Like, yeah.
Started from the bottom, now we're here.
Exactly. Now we get to talk about this book together. But the fact that we got the announcement of Project Luminous all the way back at Star Wars Celebration 2019, and now we're in 2021, and these books are finally out. It feels like forever. Thank God we made it through 2020 so we can get this new initiative, because wow. And I also want to echo what Brad is saying, that, if you're wanting to try something new within a galaxy far, far away, and you felt perhaps burned by the Skywalker saga, or are ready to move on, or just want a different timeline, some different characters you don't know yet and are ready to dive into, give it a shot, because there is something for everyone. And these books are all so different. I mean, obviously they take place during the same time period, they feature some of the similar characters, but from what I've already read, like the tones are different, the emotions are different, the storylines are different. Even though they have this big interconnected model, there is something for everyone, whether you love ships, whether they be, vroom fly, whoosh through the air, or like romantic ships, or
kissy.
Or if you like the Force, or if you like monsters or villains, like there is something there. Or you just like politics, like there's something there. It's really exciting to feel so like reinvigorated by Star Wars. And I hope that fans like myself who were feeling bummed, majorly bummed after The Rise of Skywalker, are feeling really excited about this.
Yeah, the tank has been refueled for me, certainly. I feel very hopeful for the future of stories, and I'm like, listen, if we just sit in this era and bake in it for a while, I am great. And we had that big panel last week showcasing all of the new books that are coming out soon. We're getting a manga, graphic novel. There's just so much stuff coming in 2021. Finally going to hit my Goodreads goal for once, let me tell you. It's going to be a sight long remembered for me, because I'm terrible at that. But yeah, I really do think that this is a great era of storytelling. And we got socks, Sarah. We ordered that deluxe edition.
My God.
We're getting High Republic socks very soon in the mail. Very exciting stuff.
I'm literally so excited. If there's two things I love in this world, it's socks and enamel pins. And that might make me really weird, or maybe all of the listeners out there are also socks and enamel pins kind of people. If that's you, oh my God, let me know. Let's talk about how awesome socks are. But when I saw that, I literally could not pass it up. I was like, I need both of these things. Yes, I already have this book, but like, I will get another for the socks.
Yeah, I'm just over the moon about it. But how today's episode is going to work is we are going to start with our non-spoiler review. So that's going to be us mainly talking about the plot, the pacing, structure, kind of what we liked about the book, all those sorts of things. So if you're trying to figure out if Light of the Jedi specifically is something that you want to buy, we're going to give you the overview of maybe why you should. And I would say if you also want a good overview of the High Republic, you should check out our episode, our last episode with Lipstick and Lightsabers, where we previewed the samplers that are available. So, if you hear our non-spoiler review, there still are samples out there that you can read, and that's before you invest money into the book. And that was a really fun episode to get kind of all you need to know about the High Republic. As we close out on our non-spoiler review, we're going to go full spoilers. So we're going to talk about the larger picture of the High Republic, what the galaxy and the Republic itself looks like. We're going to talk all about the Jedi because it is Light of the Jedi, and there's a lot to say about this group of peacekeepers, let's say. And we're going to close out by talking about the newest villains in this book as well, and then previewing what's to come in the future of the High Republic, because I think there are some things on the horizon where there might not be a horizon, as K2SO has said. Infamously.
Sad.
So,
don't remind me.
So, we are going to start with our non-spoiler review of Light of the Jedi by Charles Soule. I will put timestamps in the description of this episode, just so you know where to cut yourself off and not get spoiled for anything. So, Sarah, I want to start with you. What did you think of the book Light of the Jedi by Charles Soule?
Oh my gosh. Where do I even start? Light of the Jedi is thrilling. And I'm going to give credit to Scavenger's Horde because they said it first. And I'm just taking this word because it's very concise. But Light of the Jedi is cinematic. When I finished this book initially, I was like, oh gosh, I felt like I was watching a thrilling like science fiction show or space opera show. And it really feels like that. It's fast-paced, it's big and bold and new and fresh and such fun. I loved it. It exceeded my expectations. And I'm somebody who was initially cynical when I learned that it was going to be a Jedi-related project. I said to myself, more the Jedi, but it turns out I'm just cynical about the Order. I love Jedi themselves. I love every single one of the Jedi. We'll get into it. But it's really thrilling. And I think it's very different from the other Star Wars novels we've gotten. It's very different from something that somebody like Alexander Freed has written that is, a much slower pace. It's very different from, Claudia Gray's writing, which is so character detailed and dives really into character specifically. It's so different from Timothy Zahn or any of like the notable Star Wars authors that you've read something from. Charles Soule brings his own writing style to this book. He brings, I think, a really interesting perspective to kick off this whole project with, and I think he has done an excellent job. So, I mean, this is me giving a glowing review of this book. I think it's great.
Yeah, I mean, the fact that you're such a huge fan of it, I remember you being sort of skeptical going into it, and then to come out of it just feeling on cloud nine, I was very, very thrilled about that because it is a crazy book. It has very ambitious, it has a very ambitious vision, and it achieves it. And I don't think it's necessarily the type of intimate storytelling that you might get from a Claudia Gray or a Christy Golden or Rebecca Roanhorse. But the story still has so much heart. Mm-hmm. And it's almost Game of Thrones-esque in a way where the points of views are changing so often and jumping from place to place and really giving you a lot in just a couple hundred pages. And for what the book tries to achieve in doing that, I think this is really a world-building book. That is what Charles Soule was probably approached to do, was to say, hey, you have this book, please build out this High Republic era, show people what it's all about, from the Nihil to the Jedi to the High Republic itself. Show us everything and also give us really great characters, really great moments, and a whole heck of a lot of heart. And I think the book does that perfectly. And honestly, I wouldn't say it's like the best book to ever come out of Disney canon, but I really do think that it is up there. And I mean, it's definitely something that I will probably go back and reread at some point.
Yeah.
It's,
Actually.
it's paced very well. It leaves you in such suspenseful moments and hanging on the edge of your seat at the end of certain chapters, and it surprises you in a lot of ways. And I will say too, if you like romance, there are romance elements to this book, and I think to the High Republic in general. So if you're looking for that, I promise you will not be disappointed. I will not say why, because I would dare not spoil that for anybody, but you are going to love it in that respect, I promise.
I will also say, if you listened to our preview with Lipstick and Lightsabers, we talked about this book and Into the Dark and A Test of Courage, and I think we were probably the most middle of the road, like optimistic, but like, I don't know if these 8 chapters gave us the full look. And I will say that they didn't. It was worth reading on. Everything kind of clicked into place in a really meaningful way. And so if you listen to that episode and were like, I don't know about this one, we were wrong. And also, if you listen to that episode and saw our top 5s, I don't know if I'm quite ready to like rethink my top 5 right now, but like, I would rank this book among some of the books that I talked about in my top 5. So this is one that easily jumped into books that I know I'm going to be thinking about for a while. And like, again, just exceeding all expectations. So, I mean, just a really, really exciting start.
Yeah, easily cracks the top 10 books of the canon. And it's just, I think you're right in that we read those first 8 chapters from the sampler and was like, it was a lot of new characters. It was just kind of the great disaster. It felt like over and over and over again. So I would say if you get into this book and you start to feel that way and you're like, oh, it just keeps continuing, there is a point, and I think it's right around when the sampler ends, like you said, where the great disaster finally ends and we get out of the thick of it, and you really get into like, okay, where do we go from here? How do we save the galaxy? How do we prevent something like this from happening again? And that's when it gets really interesting, because you see so many different parties kind of come together, the Jedi teaming together with the Republic, and what that looks like, because we know from the prequel trilogy that the Jedi got themselves involved in military matters, and that didn't necessarily bode so well for them. So what does that look like during a time when the Republic is pretty heavily armed with a whole military, a whole defense coalition? And then what does that look like up against an enemy that can almost pop in out of nowhere and you never can project where they're coming from? And that's the Nihil. And the Nihil are just so awesome. They are so cool, and they are just the tip of the iceberg. There is a whole, we were talking before we went on air, when you think of like the best dinner of your life, I think the Nihil are kind of like the appetizer, but we haven't gotten to the entree just yet. I think there are some darker things to come. I think there are some more villains that we haven't even experienced in the High Republic era. I'm not saying that's hinted at in this book necessarily. I'm just like, my mind is kind of thinking of all the possibilities, and that's really cool to think about finally.
Well, I don't think it's a spoiler to say that we know we're going to get introduced to more villains, because it's been talked about openly in things like the panel and such things. So if we're talking about food references, we might as well make it Olive Garden. And the Nihil are the soup, salad, and breadsticks, which are delicious. I mean, who does not love
very good
an Olive Garden breadstick? And I think some of the other villains we'll get in future books will be just as good as the soup, salad, and breadsticks, but they're going to be that main course. So I think there's just a lot in motion here. Always in motion, the future is. I think that's what we're getting with this book. So
yeah, absolutely. So it's just really exciting to see how passionate people are taking to this book. And again, it's just filled with some really heartful characters that I think you will pick out somebody from Light of the Jedi that you really attach yourselves to, and that's the cool part. And you'll just stan the heck out of them, because why not? Life is short. Let's just stan our favorite characters and enjoy Star Wars, because I'm feeling good about Star Wars for the first time in quite a long time, Sarah, And I'm just here for a good time, not necessarily a long time every single time. So I'm here to
But
enjoy.
I hope I'm here for a long
yeah.
time, because this initiative is going to go into like 2025.
Yeah, I think I'm trying to approach it more from that perspective of like, I just want to be here for a good time. And yeah, like you said, hoping.
And I want this good time to go through 2025.
Exactly. But I do think there's a lot of good to come from the High Republic. And as we found out from the panel, the High Republic is split into 3 different phases. So phase 1 is Light of the Jedi, which we know is going to go into early 2022, I believe. Then phase 2 is Quest of the Jedi. Phase 3 is Trials of the Jedi. So this is the long game for Lucasfilm Publishing, and I think that even gets me more excited, because when you think about investing yourself both monetarily, emotionally, into these stories, you want to know it's going to pay off in some fashion. So to kind of have that timeline of like, okay, this is going to be a multi-year thing across many different platforms, maybe culminating with The Acolyte, on Disney Plus. So I mean, there is a very imaginative spirit with this team behind their High Republic, and I think that is what invests me, because their passion makes me passionate, and it's very contagious every single time I watch them talk about it, honestly.
Mm-hmm.
So that is kind of our overall thoughts on the High Republic. I think it's a super positive and strong start for this new era, and a very much needed, refreshing take on Star Wars to get away from the Skywalker saga. And even though there are elements that are shared with the prequel trilogy, I don't think they are distracting in this book. And I think actually they will add very richly to future stories. And I would just say have an open mind to what may yet be to come. So with that being said, Sarah, we're going to turn it over to our spoiler review of Light of the Jedi. So if you haven't read the book yet, now is the time to turn off. Go read it for yourself so we don't spoil it for you. And for all of you who've already read the book, stick around, because we have much, much more to discuss. So I'm very excited.
Yay!
Sarah, why don't you tell our listeners how we've split this episode into 4 different parts?
4 parts is a lot of parts, but we're here for the
Many
long haul.
parts.
Yeah, we're here for the long haul, just like the High Republic. So we're going to give them all their due. So here in this first part, we're going to talk about the larger picture, what's going on in the galaxy, the background, the setting, what has gotten us to where we are now at the time of the book. In part 2, we're going to talk about the Jedi, because they're the best.
The Jedi.
That's all I have to say about that. They're the best. Bye. In part 3, we are going to talk about the Nihil, because, wow, there's a lot happening there. And in part 4, Brad has aptly titled it A Shadow Looms. We're going to talk about the future just a little bit. Just a little bit.
Just a little bit. A little bit of shadowy business going on.
A little bit of speculation. A
little
bit talking about
shady.
the end and what's to come. So this is a lot going on. But we're here for it. I'm super excited to get into it.
So when we think of this book from a larger picture in the galaxy, and even just the story of Light of the Jedi and what this era really represents, I think when you look at the High Republic era, it is an era defined by a time of optimism, by a time of exploration. You have the central High Republic run by Chancellor Lina Soh, who I'm absolutely in love with. I am just completely enamored by her. She is such a better Chancellor than Palpatine, let me tell you. And even Valorum, honestly. Valorum was just trash. And this is a time when the Republic is finally starting to want to explore in the Outer Rim territories, and I think that's really exciting. It's sort of this almost like a manifest destiny in a way of the Star Wars galaxy. The Republic, not as much of a spirit of like conquering, like I think in American history, where we just wanted to like conquer everything in the West. But I think it comes from more of a place of like unity. But there is a little bit of an essence of like, colonialism of, is it the right thing for the Republic to do this and expand into the Outer Rim? But when you think about the Outer Rim at this time, it is very dangerous. There's a lot of danger that lurks there and is unknown. And I think what Lina Soh wants to do is make everybody feel safe, feel like they can communicate across different sectors of the galaxy, travel safely through hyperspace, not run into marauders. And that's where the Jedi come in. The Jedi are building outposts across the galaxy, and they are sort of the ones that are responding to these distress calls and saving your ordinary citizens from from the terrors and the dangers that lurk. But Sarah, what do you think of just this galaxy in general, and what the state of things looks like?
It is a really interesting galaxy because we think about what, Lena So is doing with her great works in attempt to, have everybody be respected, have everybody be peaceful, yada yada. And, you think that's really admirable and awesome and calming and utopian. And at the same time, we know that's not the case for the whole galaxy, which is interesting. But I think the efforts that Lena is making to make this galaxy connected and together as one, and through her "We are all the Republic" slogan, is super interesting and sets us up for a lot of potential successes and expansion of the Republic, but also very high highs lead to very low lows, or those things go hand in hand. So it's really interesting to see that this setup is so different from the Republic of the prequel trilogy, where everything is already pretty much falling to pieces.
Yeah, I think it's the prequels are a much more disastrous Republic. I mean, you have the brink of civil war, basically, and this is a time of no civil wars no wars are happening. There's no Sith. We are just riding the waves, Sarah. Surf's up, bro.
Yeah, everything is good.
Shred the
everything is
gnar.
good.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
Get your boogie boards out. Let's go. No, but what do you think of?
We are not surfers.
No, I literally can't even.
You can tell.
I can do paddle boarding. That's a fun activity. You just stand, gently roll the waves. But Sarah, what did you think of the?
That's no. That's what the High Republic is like. It's all the paddleboard. You're just gently riding the waves.
Yeah.
Standing up on your feet, going with the flow.
Yeah, and then the prequel trilogy is when the riptide comes in and you get pulled under your water and you try not to drown. Anyway.
And you drown anyway.
Yeah. Sarah, what did you think of the slogan, "We are all the Republic"? Because for me, the first thing I always thought about was "I am all the Jedi" from The Rise of Skywalker. And everybody should know I absolutely hate that line. But but I thought I didn't come from that angle going into this book, but I kind of thought it's a little cheesy, it's a little cheesy. But by the time I got to the last part of the book, and you hear it for the final time in this book at a very specific moment in Lena So's own thoughts, I finally kind of all clicked together. And I was like, oh, that's it. That's what it means. I understand. It's this idea for Lena that the galaxy has to work together, and we can't solve problems individually. We have to all come together, because one person's problem is what invariably causes another person's problem, whether it's cultural, historical, economic, or related to military matters. It's all interconnected in a way. So if Lena So can make people believe in the one vision of the Republic, that we are all the Republic, we are more than just ourselves and our own goals. If we can compromise with each other, if we can have this one idea, this one goal, this one sentiment, and we can share that, we are going to be so much better off. That it's just we're just going to ride these times as long as possible. And it won't always be like that, but let's sure as hell try,
Yeah, I will say that I definitely think that "We Are All the Republic" is cheesy.
It is.
When I initially saw those socks, I was like, what is this? Why do they have these words on them? And it is cheesy, but that's kind of the point of it. It is a very ideal situation, an ideal phrase, and Lena is really doing her best to make it possible. And it's so interesting when compared to my favorite Star Wars novel, that I talked about in the preview episode, which is Bloodline, where there's the two factions, the populists and the centrists in the New Republic. And the populists, want each world to kind of rule itself, and the centrists want the central government. And what we have right now in the Republic is a clearly centrist point of view, but with the idea that everybody has a seat at the table. So it's very it is very like utopian, and it feels a little hippy dippy, but it kind of it works. It works for the setup here, and I get what she's going for, and it's fascinating.
Yeah. I want to talk about how she thinks she can achieve that vision. So do you want to tell our listeners about the great works and what your initial impressions of those are?
Yeah, so when the first instance of the great works popped up, I highlighted those words and was like, what is this? And we get a little bit of it throughout the book. We learn that it's like infrastructure, culture, Bacta cultivation, comm relays, Republic fairs, treaty negotiations, Starlight Beacon outposts or outposts like the Starlight Beacon. In an attempt to like improve quality of life for people, bring the Republic to more people and bring people into the fold to have that same quality of life, and really give people peace of mind through her projects. And again, like they're admirable. I think you can have a conversation about the Starlight Beacons and colonialism and all that good stuff. And I think that is an important feature to consider when we're thinking about, is Lena's vision tenable? Is it achievable? And is it a moral good? I debatable.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that, you know, improving infrastructure, improving culture, and like bringing people together and making people better through Bacta and that sort of stuff is good. And it's really interesting that she calls this her capital G, capital W great works. And it's really interesting that when they talk about this in the panels and stuff, they talk about it like as if it were the Kennedy era in the White House. This is, you know, U.S. politics here. The beginning of the moon program, when we started wanting to go to the moon in the beginning of the decade and ended up on the moon. And so there's a real sense of like idea cultivation to end product goal, that there's that motivation where it's not abstract. It's like, let's make this a tangible thing that we can do now.
Mm-hmm.
So it's interesting.
Yeah.
And and the connection to US politics is interesting.
No, it is. We were listening to the panel, and Charles Soule referred to it as Camelot, you know, Star Wars' version of Camelot, and Camelot is that era that Sarah is talking about, and that's it's infamously called that because, you know, when Kennedy passed away, and Jackie Kennedy had this interview where she talked about how there was this line from the Lerner and Lowe musical to describe that Kennedy era, and it was, "Don't let it be forgot that once there was a spot for one brief shining moment that was known as Camelot." And Jackie Kennedy always said that was JFK's favorite line, so they often refer to that era as Camelot. So to think of that, the Star Wars High Republic era in terms of Camelot, and to hear the idea of great works, I even thought back to, you know, Franklin Delano Roosevelt in the 30s, who had his New Deal program, which was a bunch of different public work programs that helped to restore American spirit, American hope, by saving the economy during or in the midst of the Great Depression and afterwards. And, you know, whether or not there was some sort of cataclysmic event before the High Republic era, maybe it was the Great Sith War that is often mentioned throughout the book, this is really the Republic's chance to say, we have an opportunity right now to make future generations have a much easier time. And I think that's very inspirational to hear from Lena Soule, because she's not as much focused on like what the effects will be now. Like, yes, that is part of it, but she's also very fixated. I don't know if you noticed this, Sarah, like on her legacy. She brings it up like a ton throughout the book, how she's like very focused on like, what does her legacy look like? Her legacy will be the great works. This is it. Like, this is how she will be remembered. And I think she cares more about how the Republic will prosper and continue into the future. And I think much of what we see in the prequel trilogy is because of Lena Soule's great works. It's going to be why we have Bacta, why hyperspace travel is possible anywhere pretty much, why communication is so easy across the galaxy. Like, all these things are putting into motion what it's going to look like 200 years. 200 years isn't really that far in the future in the Star Wars galaxy. It's pretty close, honestly, you know? And
yeah,
it's incredible too that, you know, she faces a pretty big amount of pressure, the naysayers who say, why don't we just focus on now? Why don't we save our money and like just do what we can to get by right now? And she's like, no, we have to do this. Like, we have to come together so there's peace and prosperity. I'm not just going to, rule in my own self-interest and abuse my own office. I want to rule for the people. I want to show us that we can come together for good. And that's why I love her. I don't know. It's just like a good leader. And I love too the fact that she has these like two lions that come with her everywhere, Matari and Varu, who are Targans, and they have like low level empathetic abilities, which it's pretty unusual in a predator species, but they're just giant cats essentially.
They're giant cats.
Like, I love that.
I saw that concept art. So if you haven't listeners, if you have not seen that concept art of Lena So, it is not what I imagined them to look like, nor what I imagined her to look like, but it is fascinating. The giant cat / lion bodyguards, Targans, it's a very weird, very weird thing. But again, it kind of builds the world in a very fascinating way. I think I'm just going to be like, that was interesting for the rest of this podcast. I'm so sorry.
Now, Sarah, what about the Starlight Beacon? I think that's really the central great work of this story. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that and what you thought of it? What do you think its use could be in the galaxy? Like, is it a good thing? Is it a symbol of positivity in the galaxy? Or could it be seen by some as sort of like a unattainable thing?
Yeah, as I kind of hinted at a couple minutes ago, I'm kind of two minds about it. On the one hand, it is super ambitious. It brings a lot of technology to the area. It presents itself as a place where people of different cultures can come and meet, where people from the Outer Rim can come and, like, there's this, I don't know how to describe it. I don't have the quote in front of me, but like there's this section of it where it projects and manifests like the environments of other planets. It is an attempt to bring people together and expose Outer Rim worlds to the cultures, plural, and the worlds, plural, of the Republic. And so it kind of does this merging of the individuality of Republic worlds alongside the central nature of the Republic. And I think it is very interesting. Like, it is made out of a particular steel that's going to boost communication power in the Outer Rim. And like, that's awesome. At the same time, if I were some rando on the Outer Rim, I'd probably not be thrilled about this. Probably was in construction for a hot minute. But, if I'm somebody in the Outer Rim who enjoys my small planet and my way of life and doesn't need anything beyond my community, my surroundings, and my planet, I'm probably not super thrilled about this. And so I think they're like, or if I'm like a space pirate or any sort of
part of the Nihil, yeah,
if I'm part of the Nihil or any other space pirate or a ne'er-do-well, I'm also not thrilled about this. So I think it's complicated. It feels in a lot of ways kind of Trek to me. You think about Federation worlds and non-Federation worlds, and who's a part of that system, and then like the whole mission of the Federation is to go out, or part of the mission of the Federation to go out and seek new life and document new cultures and stuff like that. So I think it kind of relates to something I've already seen in other media in like a positive way, but it also can be a little messy. It also can possibly be a little messy. I think it's gonna be a little messy. If it was gonna exist and everything was gonna be fine and dandy for the rest of the initiative, that would surprise me.
Yeah, I mean, the intent is good, but it's gonna start causing problems because I think people are almost viewing it as an infringement on their way of life in the Outer Rim. But at the same time, the way of life in the Outer Rim isn't great. It's kind of chaotic. It's kind of full of marauders and pirates and raiders, and that's kind of why they're there. It's partly a Jedi outpost to listen for guidance from the Force and also protect, and it's also a Republic embassy. It's a projection of security to ward off danger. I mean, it's all of those things. So yeah, it is like I can kind of see it from both ways. Like I do see the value in the value in it more so than the downside. But there is both to it. You know, it's kind of one of those political dealings of the old, you know, the High Republic era, and it's just like, what does freedom actually look like? And is the Republic? Are we all really the Republic? Or is just putting an outpost somewhere saying we are all the Republic? You know, like what is it going to actually look like now that at the end of the book we've had the ceremony for the opening of the Starlight Beacon? Like, you know, what's it going to look like in the next book, in The Rising Storm by Kevin Scott? Like what is the Starlight Beacon going to represent once it is finally operational? Because I think it's more about your actions and what you do with these things than the intent, because sometimes the impact might not match your intent, and that's where you run into problems. So it'll be really interesting to see what happens and where this leads the Republic, because I think one thing that really stuck out to me to kind of close out this conversation is Lena So when she visits the Umate, which is the tallest peak of the Minari Range. It's like one of the last standing mountains as part of Coruscant's original topography. It's this mountain structure. It's become, a passageway. It's chambers. It means a lot of different things to different people, but to her, she sees it as a choice to stitch together the entire galaxy. But she also sees it as a thing of, there is nothing so big it could not be swallowed, nothing so strong it could not be humbled, nothing so tall it could not be made small. Not a mountain, and not the Republic. This means that failure is an option. It's the gravest option. If this fails, she says it's just going to be, quote, worlds alone in the dark. Very foreboding. And I think that's on purpose. I think if the Starlight Beacon ever gets destroyed, if they put all their eggs in one basket with these great works and they don't turn out the way they want and they're kind of just sitting ducks after that, yikes. There's a lot of danger here.
Yeah, and considering the next book by our good buddy Kevin is called The Rising Storm, this one had an optimistic title, Light of the Jedi is a good title. The Rising Storm is a little darker middle chapter, if I've ever heard a darker middle chapter title. And I do want to talk about that moment for just a second, because Umate, the tallest peak of the Menari
so cool.
Range.
I love some Coruscant geography. Give it to me.
Like, you think about Coruscant and you think about the way that it has just been built upon built. When you think about that planet, you think about it as the core of the galaxy, as the city planet. It is a city in itself. And to know that there's this more or less a park where one peak of this place shows up and nobody's just touched it is fascinating, because I think on top of everything that is you talked about, it just says, I think about our own world. It just says how close we can come to the brink of completely decimating something, how close we can find ourselves to the brink and then not realize that we're there. And maybe you mentioned that in a better way than I just did, but
no, it's true. Like, even though this mountain has been preserved for generations, it could just as easily be destroyed.
Well, it's not even that. It's like, that's all that's left.
Yeah.
Is one little mountain peak. And
it is curious.
It's like, you keep, it's kind of like the Overton window idea, that like you keep normalizing other things until other things fall out of your window, or even worse, things keep getting in the window. If you think about, American politics and what we accept and what we don't accept in our discourse and that sort of stuff. But like, you get so far over for something like climate change or humanity, the Anthropocene. I'm going real U.S. American human right now. But, but like, you get into the Anthropocene, and like, my favorite family farm was torn down and is now some cheap houses. Like, how close we can get to changing our landscape without transforming it completely.
Yeah.
Like,
what do you leave behind? And if you think about the Republic's transformation, what does it look like now, and what is it going to look like in the future with all of these changes? Is it going to still be the Republic it always was? Is it still going to be the High Republic? And I think
No.
that's exactly, I think you're using it in the perfect analogy. Like the Ume is like exactly what the Republic is going to become in the prequel trilogy. There's going to be remnants of that High Republic era still around, but the tragedies and the things that are happening that are going to dismantle the Republic is like the rest of Coruscant City kind of swallowing up that optimism that was once there and is now gone, and is going to lead to the fall of the Jedi and the fall of the Republic. You know,
it is just that idea that you go so far in one direction that you don't realize you've swallowed it all up until you've done it. I guess that's what I'm attempting to get at. I don't know if I've done a good job at that or not, but
no, I mean, I completely agree with you. You just kind of blew my mind, actually, when you put it, when you analogize that mountain to like what the Republic is, and what it could end up being, unintentionally. It's, yeah. So Sarah, let's get off Coruscant. Which, by the way, I just have to say, can you believe we're getting capital N new Star Wars content in Coruscant? Can you just...
I love that for us.
Prequel Renaissance. Please, if you ever think of Friends of the Force, prequel Renaissance. Just think of us and think of that. We love the prequels. Anyways, let's go out of Coruscant into the Outer Rim. It's a very dangerous place. It's exciting, and it's deadly, but more deadly than exciting in truth. And it's a place where people can go to escape the laws of the Republic and have a new life, and but it's still filled with predators everywhere. And I think that is kind of the gamble that you take by traveling to the Outer Rim. So we spend these first 120 pages in the Hetzel system, and this is where the Great Disaster takes place. We later learn in the book that the Nihil were the ones responsible for the Great Disaster, because as the Legacy Run was traveling through space, the Nihil came across hyperspace. They came across it, smashing into the Legacy Run and raining these pieces of the ship full of passengers down across the Hetzel system. And the Hetzel system is one of my new favorite places. I feel like I always attach myself to a new place. I know in Shadowfall, I'm blanking on the name of the city right now, but like that whole planet used to be the old Coruscant.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, yes.
Yeah, and like now Hetzel is my new love, right? And
yes.
You know, it has the two moons, the fruited and the rooted, which, like, Charles, thank you. But what's really cool about Hetzel is it's focused on agriculture. It exports food all over the Outer Rim, and it's also where Bacta's being created. It's gonna replace Juvan, which is the current medical treatment. It's this new miracle replacement that everybody sees it as, and it's growing here. It's gonna revolutionize medicine, and they use every bit of Hetzel to its capacity to grow. And they have croplands on the rooftops. They have harvester droids, you know, floating among various towers, and there's fruit vines hanging, and there's rivers and lakes growing algae and water weeds. It's like a beautiful, serene, orange glow sort of place. It is just beautiful. And the tragedy that this thing has to happen to this wonderful system, this wonderful tri-sunned system. There's 3 suns. Take that, Tatooine.
Incredible.
Take that.
Yeah. Think about those sunsets you can stare off into.
Yeah.
Suck it, Luke Skywalker.
That's right. But was the Great Disaster what you expected it to be? You know, I thought it was very tragic too, to just see how society responded to the Great Disaster, because you have the sort of politics of it with Minister Eka, who, he's like, why can't we shoot these things down? They're like, you didn't invest in the shoot down system. And he's like, shit. And that's pretty funny. And then you have society where it says, quote, some people ignored the warning. False alarms had happened before. True. Nothing had ever happened of the scale, but really that made it easier to dismiss the whole thing. After all, the entire system in danger, it just wasn't possible. End quote. Some people stayed in their homes, and some people turned off their screens and went back to work, and the other people who wanted to get off planet and saw the red flags and wanted to get out of Dodge, they couldn't, because traveling off world is an expense. It's usually only reserved for special occasions, and really the only rich people are getting off planet. Ticket prices are skyrocketing to unattainable levels. It felt very COVID-like. It is so freaking weird that this book came out when it did, because you see all the telltale signs of a disaster. Even in our real world, there's still people who have said, false alarms have happened before. We don't need to prepare for this thing. It's fine. The pandemic response office, or whatever it was called, had got dismantled long before January. Could have been helpful this time around. So there's all the telltale signs of a disaster striking, and how we respond to it in this book that we've seen in our own world. And I just thought it was really interesting how we saw those two things and these two worlds of ours sort of blend together in a way that we could relate to. Did you get that impression as you read The Great Disaster? Because I just did not expect it to really hit me in a COVID sense.
Yeah, I definitely got some of those vibes as well. And one of the things that I found really interesting, kind of going back to beginning of your talking about Hetzel, is that it is a bit of a workhorse planet. It is not leisurely. It is not a place you go to travel for vacation. It is a planet that provides, and it is a system that provides all sorts of agriculture. They rotate the crops and are able to grow, tons of different things every year that provide for the rest of, the Outer Rim, the Republic, and everybody in between. And so this system particularly is very, very, very important for that reason alone. And I definitely, when we talk about the society and the politics, I definitely felt that relation to our current situation, because it is a sense of complacency, oh, it hasn't happened anytime in the recent past, so why do we have to prepare for it now? Or why do we keep funneling money into this when we could be doing X, Y, and Z? And it felt disappointing, not in the sense that I can't believe he'd write something like that, but it felt a sense in the disappointing that the leaders had let down their people by not investing in those things that they were once investing in, preparing for. Because by, discontinuing an office, by not putting funds into that plan that they were putting funds into, they're doing disservices to all of their billions of citizens. And that's what hit home the most, is those choices at the top, because of their complacency, affected real people in real time as this disaster was happening. Now, this disaster was indeed a freak thing in a lot of ways, but at the same time, even freak things need responses.
Yeah, it is really fascinating, and I think what really struck me the most was sort of the class division that was happening. The people, I think there was the imagery.
Oh my God, yes.
The imagery when Lodin and Bel Zettifar get down there, and there's the high walls with the guards on top, and there's a ship transport on the inside of the gates, and all the people are we can all fit on there. Just let us fly with you. And they won't. And I think this was very purposeful.
Wonder where I've seen that.
Very purposeful for Charles, even when you think of people getting really excellent medical care, in a COVID world, and a lot of us out here are just trying to get by, and hospitals are running at capacity, and ventilators aren't where they need to be, and the medical workers are just working their asses off, and it's tragic. And we just don't have the resources that we need. They're somewhere. They in a way feel like they're behind a locked gate, guarded. And it's just
yes,
but why? Why can't we have that? Why can't we be on the transport? Why can't you help us to the way we need, And I think that was what really struck me. But when you look at Minister Eka, I think even though he didn't necessarily prepare for this completely well, I think his decisions in the moment to be a leader is very in a stark contrast to the quote-unquote leaders. I won't actually call him a leader because I don't think he is. But the decisions that have been made in our real world, because Minister Eka says, as bad as things might be, the longer you wait, the worse they get. So it's almost like he realizes he can't afford to look back at what decisions he made and didn't make, or try to find out who he can blame it on. It's just that, this couldn't have been anticipated. And at this point it's happening, and I need to do everything I can to save a life, And I think that was the telltale sign of his leadership. And, yeah, he made mistakes, but he's reacting to it in real time and with the people in mind versus his reputation of what he didn't do versus his chances at office the next round. It's a leader. He's a leader.
Yeah, and it also becomes a sense of, I can't look back and blame somebody now because I have to act in the moment. And if I don't act in the moment, it will fall to me. It will fall on me.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, he's not to me as much of a leader as somebody like Kevin Tarr, who really steps up.
Yeah.
Or Jorah or Avar, or even whatever his name is. Coronar. I keep thinking Corona, but it's Coronara.
Oh, Cronara.
I don't know. That name got me because it reminded me of Corona. But
Admiral
I think
Corona.
their leadership. Yeah, I think their leadership is all like really admirable during this time, and whereas Eka is having to do much more scrambling in order to get things on the right page.
Yeah. So we'll talk more about Kevin Tarr later on. I have a lot to say about him because I think he's actually one of my favorite characters from this book, and I hope he returns. Let's jump to Avar Kriss. So the great disaster's happening. There's a lot of shit going down, and who else to come to the rescue than the Jedi? And when we talk about Avar Kriss and the central characters of this book, I think she is the central character of this book. She is front and center on the cover. I'm very happy she's the central figure. She's very fascinating. She is kind of like the Yoda of the High Republic time in a way. And she sees the Force as a song. She can kind of detect natural bonds between Force users and utilize them as a communication tool. And it's not necessarily something that's super accurate, but it's more of a detect sensations and detect locations. And it's when the Jedi hear her song, it's like a feeling that they have rather than specifics. They can sense the danger's coming. They might not know what the danger is, though, right? What did you think of Avar Kriss and just the fact that she shows up to the Hetzel system? She's ready to fight. She's ready to save some lives, and this will also lead us. This will close out part 1 for us and into part 2 as we discuss more of the Jedi.
You mean my gorgeous Jedi queen, Jedi Master Avar Kriss? I'd love her. I would die for her. She is such a fascinating figure. And I mean, we could talk about characters in this book, and we're going to talk about characters in this book, but she sticks out as throughout the book, the person that we are going to see as the leader. And what I love about her, aside from the fact that she sees the Force as a song, because as like a musically inclined person, I live for that, and that's a beautiful and wonderful interpretation of the Force, because music itself is just so diverse and all over the place. You get things like Lultian politifolk. I'm just kidding. You get things like jazz to heavy metal to dubstep, to all these different if you listen to music widely, you know how widely music sounds. And so I love that so much, because I think you can place whatever music is on your heart into her song and imagine it in so many different ways. And so I love that a lot. I love the fact that she can tap into the Force and enhance the connections of others. I think this is so important because we talk about the Jedi, we talk about attachment and connection, and sometimes there's a miscommunication, I think, between Jedi. Jedi have different philosophies. And while I don't think that is nullified by Avar's power, I do think it is cool that Avar's power allows them to communicate better with each other by enhancing their connections and allowing them to, sense their positions and their feelings and those sorts of things better than they would without it. And that's really freaking cool.
Yeah, I think the most neat part about her is she doesn't really use the Force as a superpower. She is like the epitome of what the Force actually is. It's about not jumping down to the Hetzel system, which, by the way, I love when it says Avar Kriss.
She does.
It says Avar Kriss believed that the best way to win arguments was simply not to have them. And then she yeets herself out of the ship down to Hetzel. I'm like, girl, that is the perfect response to controversy.
but she doesn't. What she's figured out is that she's not going to engage in conversations and arguments that will go nowhere and lead to no solutions. She will find the solution and she will execute that solution.
Yeah.
And she doesn't ask questions of other people in a way that gets into the weeds of nonsense. Like, we'll talk about it later, but like, she doesn't ask Elzar to explain why he is the way he is. She just accepts him and understands like he's going to do what he's going to do and she's going to do what she's going to do. And I think that's great because I think it presents her as a very specific kind of leader that trusts the people around her to do the things that they need to accomplish. Like, when she gives them a task, she knows they're going to go through with it.
Yep.
And she's someone that you immediately, to me, like, I immediately feel comfortable around this character.
Mm-hmm.
Not because she's incredibly likable and she's like friendly to everybody, but because she is goals oriented. And at the same time is people oriented. And I love that. I think she is great.
Yeah.
She's great.
Yeah, and like, she trusts in the Force, and when you think about her just kind of taking Elzar at face value and not necessarily trying to understand the mechanics of his mind, it's the same thing with the Force. It says that she doesn't try to shove forward and find the answers that she wants. She listens to what it wills in its own time. You know, she goes down to Hetzel. There's that missing spot that she can't quite find, which we understand is the super cooled liquid Tabana gas that's heading towards one of the suns in that system, and it's going to cause a huge chain reaction that basically cooks the entire system in seconds, right? And she goes down to the planet, and she's surrounded by life, and she finds the missing note that she needed. You know, she doesn't push for that answer on the starship. She goes, okay, I'm going to trust in the Force. I'm going to go surround myself with it, surround myself with those natural elements of the Force, and seek that deep connection. It's not going to take me a lot of effort to find that connection because I am so surrounded by the Force. It's going to be easy for me. And it's almost like she's the definition of think smarter, not harder. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah, definitely.
Would you agree with that? I feel like now I'm just having a moment here where I'm like, that's literally Avar Kriss. You know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, she is. Yeah, that's a great way to put it. She's like, we're just going to do it. We're not going to fuss around about it and make it more difficult for ourselves. We're just going to go into it.
Yeah. So I think that brings us to part 2 of our discussion, which is the Jedi. And something that really sticks out about the High Republic is both the strength of the Force and the ways in which the Force is perceived. Because you know, Avar is not unique in the way that she sees the Force in terms of seeing it differently. There's a whole couple pages describing how each Jedi sees the Force, and I think that's really fascinating. So as they discover that this super cooled Tabana gas is heading towards the sun, you know, she reaches out through the Force and says, you know, we will find it together. And she becomes the starlight beacon of the Jedi. You know, it's kind of interesting, right? She's the light of the Jedi. She's somebody that everybody can hear and sense. She's, you know, it says the galaxy thrummed, and there's an invisible hand kind of grasping each of the Jedi and grasping the Tabana gas. Sorry, and making it come to a stop. And I love how she uses her lightsaber to like throw it up in the air and make it start spinning and like causing this humming, whining, ringing sounds that the Jedi
That is some weird shit.
Right? It's like it's like a dog whistle.
Imagine. I think about that and I have to laugh because it's fascinating, but it works.
I do love how each Jedi sees the Force differently. We have Elzar, who sees it as a deep, endless, storm-tossed sea. We have Buryaga, who thinks of it as a single leaf on a gigantic tree with deep dug roots and sky-high limbs. Douglas Sunvale, who we never really get to interact with, but he sees it as a huge interlocked set of gears made of various materials from crystal to bone.
I love these.
Bel Zettifar danced with fire, whereas his master Loden Greatstorm danced with the wind. Estala Maru, she sees the Tabana gas as a single light in a single window in a building of an endlessly spiraling nighttime city. And even Yoda! We know how Yoda sees the Force. Yoda, his great mind, sang its own part of the chorus, heartbreakingly beautiful a voice of pure light relying on his physical appearance. Not this crude matter indeed. What a great line. That's one of those nostalgia callbacks. So I'm just like, that actually works right there. That's perfect. So it's just so awesome to see how they each approach the Force in a different way, and that's what makes them so powerful. It's not like they've leveled up the Force in a way that makes them strong. It's that they have found a way to connect to the Force that allows them to sense it even more profoundly. It's that perception of the Force that makes them strong, not the Force itself.
And I think what's so beautiful, oh my God, shout out to Charles who wrote this, but I'm also imagining that this element might have been, workshopped among the authors. But these are so beautiful because what they really do is exemplify themselves with relation to the Force, and also things that are a part of the Force as parts of a whole and as interconnecting elements that relate to their own lives. So, it makes me wonder if music was really important to Avar growing up as a Padawan, or, on whatever her home planet is, or if Elzar is connected to the sea in some way, right? And like Buryaga, right? A single leaf on a gigantic tree with deep dug roots and sky-high limbs. Excuse me.
That's like his childhood.
He's from Kashyyyk,
yeah,
which is a planet of giant Wosher trees where they build their homes.
Which, by the way, the Jedi outpost on Kashyyyk has a tree house. Come on,
yes, yes,
lit.
But that plus something like Douglas Sunvale, who again we don't get to see, which is unfortunate because I love this idea of the interlocking set of gears. And they all need each other, no matter what they're made of, to come together and crank, and turn and make the Force go. And oh my God, I love different interpretations of the Force.
Yeah.
You think of the Legends of Luke Skywalker and the Tide, and then you think of something like this. And I think these all work so beautifully with one another because it doesn't just say that, different interpretations of the Force is limited to culture. Some other cultures won't think about the Force as the Jedi do, but each Jedi has a different way of seeing the Force. I think that is beautiful and brilliant and one of my favorite things to come from this book and this initiative at all. And I hope we get more of these tellings, more of them talking about and diving into the Force as these books go on. More of this, please.
And I think this is why the Republic and the Jedi work so well together during this era, because they fundamentally believe in the same thing, right? Lina So believes that they can't solve their problems individually, much like Avar Kriss says, we will find it together. She understands that they can't take down this Tabanagas individually. She has to unite Jedi across thousands of light years away. Like, even Yoda's nowhere near the Hetzel system, but he's still a part of this, and he helps with his Padawans on his sabbatical trip that we're going to learn about in the comic book, I think by Daniel Jose Older. I think that's his comic. That's the fascinating thing is they fundamentally have that same philosophy at their core, and that's why they work together well during this era. Whereas I think when you look at the prequel trilogy Jedi, I don't think they are as much willing to give up their own lives to save an entire system. I think they are a little more selfish and dogmatic and introspective and don't want to get involved in the matters of different systems. So I think you really do see, I'm wondering when that shift happens. And obviously we see that the Republic also becomes a place of more kind of focused on the bigger picture of the galaxy and more on the nuances of like trade route taxation and all these just really random things that kind of clog up bureaucracy without actually getting anything done. And it's something that Padme Amidala tries to come in and shake up as much as she can. And I think almost in a way, Padme is the next iteration of Lina So in terms of her ideals. But it's all very fascinating. It's all very interconnected. They believe in the same things is what I'm trying to say. And I'll go off on some tangent about Padme if I don't stop myself. So let's talk about the, quote, golden age of the Jedi.
Yeah.
I think this is something that has potentially turned people off to the book because I, as much as you do, believe that the Jedi are flawed, and they are the reason that the Republic fell. And just like Luke in the Last Jedi, they were very full of hubris, and they screwed up, to say the least. So why should I read these books about the Jedi being interpreted as the saviors and the heroes? Like, why would I, a reader, want to read a book about that, knowing that they're flawed? Sarah, why would you tell somebody who thinks that way, or maybe is like a little hesitant to read this book because of that, which I totally understand and is completely valid. I had the same worry going into the book. I don't anymore. What would you tell a reader who is kind of in that conundrum, that kind of middle ground, limbo area?
Well, I first want to say that you brought up The Last Jedi, and I just wanted to find that quote, which is, "But if you strip away the myth and look at their deeds, the legacy of the Jedi is failure." It's interesting. And I don't think that idea, if you love that idea in Last Jedi, I don't think that's gone here. We are at the beginning of something, not the end of it. So your question is, if you, like me, are cynical about it, why should you pick up this book?
Yes.
Is that essentially what you're asking?
Yeah, so
me?
for somebody who is like, I don't want to read about the Jedi in their golden age, they're flawed. They suck. They kind of suck. Why would I want to read about them?
Yeah, but did you not listen to us talking about all these amazing interpretations of the Force?
And I think the key is the key is what you said. You don't like the Order, but you like the Jedi. You like the individual Jedi.
Yes. So I think that is thank you for answering your question with words that I said before. Thank you so much. You did all the work there. Thank you.
We finish each other's sandwiches.
Thumbs up. I think what we're getting at here is the beginning of an end. And the values of the Jedi at this time are valuing all life, not necessarily getting involved in war, being mediators through Jedi outposts, and really thinking at high levels using the Force to come to solutions and better ways to practice and that sort of stuff. And I think these are all admirable. But I really think what shines, as we've just mentioned, are the individuals. It is not about the Order as much as it is the individuals in the Order. It's about the cogs in the big wheel to make it go round. And that's what I think is special about this book, is that it doesn't feel like it is about the Order. And again, I love the failure of the Jedi in the prequels. And I don't think you have to deify the Order. You as a reader don't want to deify the Order. I don't think that the book pushes that on you in an aggressive way. I think that the book wants to extol that they have these admirable values, which they still do in the time of the prequels,
right?
And the Republic's falling. They still have admirable values, but you can look at this book, read all the lines in it, and still say, ugh, they're kind of still a mess, or there's some cracks here. And I don't know. I don't know if I'm answering your question or just rambling. I think the strong point is the ways that, you interpret the Force and the individuals and their relationships. And that in itself, their relationships with one another goes against what the Order's teachings are about attachment. They're still kind of doing the same thing they've always been doing.
No, I think
despite this being a great time.
I think you have an excellent answer. What you're saying is, yeah, this book is not like propaganda for the Jedi Order. That's not what this is.
Yeah, I don't think so. I agree with you.
Character driven, many different characters in this book. I think oftentimes it almost is too much in this book. I think there's too many points of view, but again, I think that's kind of what Charles was tasked with, and he still did it really well. But I hope in the future it's kind of more, and I think that's where Cavan's book is going. It's more focused on a couple of people versus so many people. But it is still very character focused, and like you said, the values. I think one of the biggest things that stuck out to me is the value of all life. I mean, Bell at one point says to himself that lightsabers were designed to end conflicts, and that, you know, there was no collateral damage with a lightsaber. That was something that can kill very quickly. And it's the thing that when people see it, they see that light and they hear that hum, it's like a warning. It's giving that person you're about to face down, every possible chance not to fight. And if they don't make the choice not to fight, at that point, you've given them the chance, right? And that's what Loden thinks too. His master kind of follows that same philosophy. You know, it says, quote, "He did not want anyone to die ever, but sometimes he had found people chose their own ends, and there was nothing he or even the Force seemed to be able to do about it."
Oh my gosh, that's a great quote to pull, because I don't have anything to say about it. That's just a great quote to pull. It struck out to me as you know, despite following the Force and despite everything, sometimes, you know, not everybody has the same philosophy, and sometimes people just play stupid games and win stupid prizes.
Yeah, and even later on, my last one here that I have an example for is Avar Kriss. When she is in that final battle and she senses the Nihil start to die, she thinks, quote, "The song had become sad. The Nihil had become like small wild creatures trapped in a cage, desperate to escape, doing anything they could, even if it hurt them. Even if it killed them. Such a terrible waste." So she realizes even, like, the Nihil, she has sympathy for them, and it's such a waste that they have to die like this. But at this point, it's like they've kind of laid their bed, you know, they're doing anything they can to get out, but like, what a waste, you know? And I think it really does, paint the Jedi in a way that, like, they do value all life, but they're willing to give all life a chance. The chance, it might be a split-second decision, as is the case with many of these lightsaber fights. Like, nope, done. You had a choice very quickly to make there, and you didn't make it. So I have to protect my people. You know.
Yeah, and some of them, they've made their choice a long time ago. Yeah, and they're sitting so far in it that it's clear that they're not going to make another choice in the immediate, future.
And when we talk about the values of the Jedi and, like, are they perfect? Are they imperfect? I think the best example of that is the Jedi Council meeting, which happens in this book. And that's the second interlude before part 3, The Storm. And I texted you this. I was like, this is something we're going to chat about. Like, absolutely. Because I think really this is probably the only time in the book that really digs into the order itself and, like, gets into that nitty gritty. And it's through the perspective of somebody who is fed up to her wits end with the Jedi Order, and she's just annoyed as hell. It is Jorah Mali, who is the master of Reath Silas, who is the Padawan in Claudia Gray's Into the Dark. So it's interconnected, and it's cool to see her perspective.
If I may, I would like to speak directly to the High Republic creative team in this moment. I would like my Jorah Mali prequel to the Star Wars The High Republic book. She's fascinating. Okay, that's all I have to say. I really want more of her.
Rest in peace. My God, my heart was pulled out of my
chest. I flipped the page and I was like, is she?
No.
She dead?
No.
She dead?
I was so upset.
Can't be. She can't be dead. She was dead. Readers, she was dead.
But it's incredible because the fact that we felt that and this interlude is only a couple of pages just goes to show how loudly she spoke, despite speaking very little in that Jedi Council meeting. And she makes that observation several times that, like, they just don't shut up.
Well, isn't there another passage where she's talking to Lena So or somebody, and it, like, describes her as, like, though she may be small, like a small, I think she's
I think she attends the very first meeting, like, very early on.
She's like, she may be small, she may look unthreatening, she is sharp, and she is won't take any nonsense, and she knows what she's here to do. And I love her. She's fascinating.
So Sarah, who is on the council, at least what we've gathered from these couple of pages, who is on the council at this time in the High Republic?
All right, I'm ready. Yariel Proof, Rana Kant, Oppo Ranesisis, Keaton Murag, Adalie Caro, Jorah Mali, Master Rosasun, Master Adampo, Airfru Shin, who's a Mon Calamari, Grandmaster LaRue, and 2 more people who I'm not sure we have named.
Master Yoda is the other one.
No,
but
he's
Master
not on the
Yoda is
council.
replaced. Master Yoda is being replaced by Efru Shin, because
Yeah.
Master Yoda is on sabbatical. I couldn't find who the other 2 were. I just might have not looked hard enough. But
So I think
yeah.
I think that we have most of the council, and the couple of those names, including Yoda, stick through to the prequel era, which is really fascinating.
Yeah, Yariel Poof. I mean, long neck Jedi, man. Oh God.
He's a Kaminoan, right?
I don't know what his species is. I don't think he's not Kaminoan. There's a different. Let's find out. You know, we have the internet. We have the internet at our fingertips.
He's Quirmian.
Okay.
Quamarin. They have 2 brains, one located inside their head, one located inside their chest, and 2 pairs of arms.
So he's like Doctor Who. Okay.
Yes, but they don't have 2. The Doctor does not have 2 pairs of arms.
Right.
You're like, I guess.
He has 2 arms, but he has 2 hearts, and that's why Yariel Poof is in the hearts of so many. So yeah, there is a little bit of crossover, which was really cool to see that like some of these council members are the same ones that we see in the Phantom Menace. So this conversation, this debate, the debate is: do we fight the Nihil? Do we join the Republic? And I love how we're seeing it through the eyes of Jorah, how she's kind of finding it pretty tiresome. She sees them arguing over like, how do we interpret the will of the Force? And she just mostly sees it as like a philosophical vortex, like, you know, and it's just kind of like, are we going to argue over like the antics of the Force all day, or are we actually going to do something and help people out? And I think when you look at the prequel Jedi, they spend way too much time in those chambers, which, funny detail, I guess, I never even thought of it, of like why the windows of the High Council are structured in that way. It's because it's like open. The Jedi have nothing to hide, so it's very symbolic in that way. So I think, you know, even though they have nothing to hide, it's like almost like, what are they hiding? Like, what are they doing actually? Are they making any decisions, or are they just sitting there playing chess and making people guess, you know, is it a ship or a cup on my tablet? So,
but it's not even that they have nothing to hide. They can say if we're talking about fault lines in the Jedi Order, they say they have nothing to hide. Their whole Jedi council room, you just called it something, but I guess I'm calling it the Jedi council room, is plastered in windows, but it's so high above everybody else.
right.
It's so far away from everybody else. Can anybody actually see in?
Oops.
Something to think about. Because they might have windows. They might be able to see the sun when it's up. They are still very far removed from everybody else.
Windows are a language.
Windows are a language. Yeah, I saw your note. But the windows allowed them to see out and theoretically allow others to see in, but who's actually able to see that far? And it kind of goes back to that question you were saying, or the question that the debate is posing, is, you know, what does the Force will it? You know, the Jedi are so focused on, you know, their outposts and their coordination with the Republic, and then the Council kind of sits in this room kind of far away from them and theorizes for a while, and, you know, they're removed from the Jedi on the ground too, and so it's an interesting thought to think about the Council as removed from the day-to-day, because they are. And then you go back to Master and Apprentice and Qui-Gon and you yada yada yada, etc., etc. If you've read it, you know.
It really did change my perspective though of like what is the purpose of the Council, because like to Jorah, I think it's really, she's the best person to see this through the eyes of, and she makes a good point of like, every single Jedi is connected to the Force, right? So whatever decision the Jedi make is the will of the Force. So to sit there and have these endless debates about what does the Force want, The Force wants what you will it to. Like, your decision is going to be the will of the Force. So it's almost paralyzing in a way to just sit there and try to figure out, what do we do? It's a waste of time. So I think her point to the council, when it comes down to her deciding vote, it's a 5-5 tie. Do we help the Republic fight the Nihil? She is the deciding vote. Her quote is, "Does the action I'm about to take bring more light to the galaxy? In this case, the answer is clear." It's really that simple. It's that freaking simple. Is the thing I'm about to do going to bring light to the galaxy? In this case, the Nihil are causing strife and suffering, taking life from so many citizens, and the Jedi have to do everything in their power to stop that from ever happening again. So the choice is so obvious, and for them to sit there and endlessly debate, do we stop more disaster or do we not? What is the will of the Force? It just seems like, and Jorah's just like, why? We're going to bring light to the galaxy by saving the galaxy. Like, of course we will. Why are we debating this? It's just great. It's great stuff.
Yeah, and I want to highlight a great moment on page 300. You and I, Brad, both love our girl, Avatar Kyoshi. We get a Kyoshi moment from our good buddy, Yariel Proof. Yariel Proof here. And he says, "Yes, but we are guardians of two ideals, are we not? Sometimes, unfortunately, they come into conflict. We must always strive for peace, but also justice. Peace without justice is flawed, hollow at its core. It is the peace provided by tyranny." And I think that in that moment, Poof kind of gets at the heart of it. They want peace, they want justice. They straddle these two ideals, these two philosophies in a way, right? And another way we see fault lines in the Jedi is through this. What will bring light? We have to go with that choice. I don't know. Anyway, the Jedi are flawed. Read the book.
Yeah, but I do think this, there's such a stark juxtaposition between like the individualism that we see throughout the book and then this specific interlude of like, look at all of the boots on the ground, making the hard choices, saving the lives, doing what needs to be done. Then you have these couple of Jedi Masters sitting on this council, but like, they're not the ones in the Outer Rim. They're not the ones saving the Blythes on the Ogden's homestead. They're not the ones on the Ataraxia fighting against the Nihil. They're sitting in their chambers. So it's like a little bit of a out of touchness to it. So when you ask yourself, should I read this book? Is it going to glorify the Order? It doesn't. This chapter is very, very much about the Jedi are pretty much just as, like, the Jedi Order are pretty much just as dumb as they are in the prequels. Like, but it's the great acts of kindness of the individual Jedi, the Elzar Mans, the Belzadafars, the Indira Stokes. Those are the Buryagas. Like, those are the ones that make these books worth reading. And I think as the Jedi Order advances, it's when you lose the spirit of those specific Jedi and that doesn't get passed on from generation to generation because the Jedi Order can never teach the right things. That's when you get the hubris. That's when the Jedi Order falls. And I think this is why it's the High Republic, is because you have these incredibly compelling characters who do the right thing and who understand the will of the Force is their actions, and their actions are to save people and to save lives. And there's no question as to it. But for these people to sit here in this high tower and endlessly debate it is just so out of touch. It really, really is. I do want to say a note on Jorah Mali. She has a kyber crystal that was actually purged from a Sith light spear. So her lightsaber blades are white. And I just want to say, Jorah Mali, like, she was like, well, I only did it as an intellectual exercise, but then the kyber crystal kind of liked me, so I kept it. I'm like, oh yeah, no big deal. I just, on my Friday nights when I'm bored, I just purge kyber crystals. Like, no big deal. I'm cool like you. It's fine.
I love her. Okay, I'll get closer to my microphone now. That shit is insane.
Yeah, it's really cool.
Anyway, that's why I want more of her for stuff like that. She's like, I did it just because, but I was kind of feeling it. I was kind of vibing with it. And me and the Force, we were kind of like linked up, and we were like, I guess we'll go with this now. Like, that's so fucking cool. Anyway.
Well, I will say we've talked quite a bit on the Jedi and their failings and how it's still pretty evident in the High Republic era. But like we said, read these books for the individuals, because that is the focus. The focus is not the order. And to dilute every single Jedi to what the Order believes in, I think is a disservice to those specific Jedi. And as we're going to see some Lost 20 here and there. We're going to start to see them drop off like flies, you know? So that's also exciting. Like, who is going to be the first of the Lost 20 or the first couple? I would be interested to know. And you should all read Into the Dark by Claudia Gray when it comes out next month, because you're going to learn a whole lot more about Reath Silas, who is the Padawan of Jorah. I will say, too, Skier, who is the Trandoshan Jedi, is really cool, and he has a pretty close-knit relationship with Jorah. It was really hard to see him both lose his arm and lose his best friend at the same moment. And
the same go.
The fact that they were both joking about not dying right before, and I'm just like, damn it, I know something bad's about to happen. But I love how they talked about Trandoshan Jedi being pretty rare, because that species is built on predation and supremacy, and those don't necessarily line up with the Order precepts. But even when there are Force-sensitive Trandoshans, it's still unusual for them to go to the Jedi Temple.
Mm-hmm.
What did you think of Skier? Did you like him? You think he's pretty cool?
Yeah, I think he's pretty interesting. I wasn't drawn to him as I was drawn to some of the other Jedi in this book, but I did appreciate him and his connection with Jorah, and I'm interested to see where he's going to go, because I think he's got a really interesting background as a Trandoshan Jedi, and how his limbs regrow.
Yeah.
Who doesn't love that?
And I will say, too, there's a lot of loss in this book. I mean, when you look at Skier, when you look at Buryaga and Mikkel, they lose Tayami during the fight to retain the Legacy Run's black box or flight recorder. We lose Loading Greatstorm. So I think these are lose in the sense that Bell thinks he's lost. He doesn't really sense him as strongly through the Force, even though he's taken captive by the Nihil. And I think we're going to start to see, how do all these Jedi who are so adamant about purging themselves of emotions and attachment, what are they going to do, and how are they going to react to losing some of their favorite people? Which, Sarah, that brings us to kind of our subsection of our Jedi portion of this episode, which is the relationships between different Jedi. And the core of this book, like we said, are the individuals. So let's focus on some of those individual relationships and why this book sticks out to us, and why, even though it does focus on so much and try to do so much in just a couple hundred pages, it still has a lot of heart. So who would you want to start with? Who do you want to...
Who do I want to start with?
You want to go there right away? We doing it? We doing it live?
Should we start with somebody?
I don't know. Should we build up? I don't know.
Let's, okay. Let's start with, actually, we will build up. We will build up.
Yeah, we're going to build up.
We're changing the go. I think we should start. We're going to go the other way around than our notes are. I think we should start with Nib Asek, and specifically, this is just an excuse to talk about Buryaga.
Yes.
And also maybe a little bit about Tayami and Mikkel. So Buryaga, on the cover of the book, if you've seen the cover of the book, you know how beautiful he is. He's so beautiful, with his gold fur, kind of goldish brown fur. Anyway, he's so sweet. He saves everybody. And he has a big heart, despite some communication barriers, because Shriwook is hard for humans in their vocal cords. But he really is the one that says stop. I think there are people on that fragment of the ship. He's the one that says, I see this boy over here who looks out of place and looks upset. I'm just going to sit with him and understand him and be there for him. Buryaga, man, I didn't expect him to crawl that way into my heart, but he did. And he's got a really special relationship with his master, Nib Asek, because she understands him. They speak to one another. She can understand Shriwook. And they have that communication through line. And I like that as well.
Yeah, Buryaga is definitely one of the softest of the Jedi. He's an empath by nature. He senses, when Surge, who is one of the first characters we meet in the first chapter, he's a little boy who carries a lot of the weight of what happens and thinks he's the one that caused the Legacy run. Buryaga goes over there and hugs him, and it says, quote, "When someone was hurting, you did what you could to heal them. When someone was lost, you found them." I'm like, God, Buryaga is such a poet. He's just so emotional, and I love that. I think for a Jedi Order who encourages purging emotions, he does not shy away from that whatsoever. He is very emotional indeed, and I love how, too, he hates social gatherings because no one understands him. But also it's somewhat of a superpower because people think that just because he doesn't, speak typically in the terms that, or the languages that they might, he's listening quite a bit. And he picks up on a lot of information. And I think that makes him very wise. But when Joss and Pika Adren kind of praise him up as one of the heroes of the great disaster that saved so many lives, he says, quote, "They were treating him like some sort of ... end quote. And the ellipses there at the end kind of makes me think that he is a little bit of in self-doubt. He doesn't necessarily see himself as a leader just yet, or that he can be a hero. But I think, again, he has the wisdom, he has the empathy. I think if when you talk about different roles of the Jedi, which we kind of hear about through Porter Engle, I think he could maybe take on the role of like a healer, possibly, or like a teacher, a Jedi teacher. I think that's more in his future than like a warrior type. I don't think he's meant to be a warrior. I think he's more along the lines of maybe some of the younglings like that Yoda teaches, and I think that's kind of his future, and that's very bright.
He also could be something like a diplomat, kind of understand where people from other cultures or worlds are at, and try to meet them there. I think also we kind of get that relationship. These are kind of smaller ones, but Taami and Mikkel, and Taami, may she rest in peace. I want to take a sidebar for a moment just to pour one out for all those we lost in this book, including Romar Montgo, Leo Jossi, Jedi Knight Rad, Barokchi, Jorah Malley, Captain Bright, just to name a few.
Oh, Captain Bright.
Those
came and went too soon.
Those that we lost. Yeah, those we lost in this one. Taami as well. What I love about Taami and Mikkel, in the small moment that we kind of get to know them, Mikkel and Taami kind of get along, and they think about working together, and she says, "I think I'm going to report you to the council for forming an attachment to me. How dare you?" Jokingly, but like they're recognizing that this rule is a little silly because in order to work with one another, you have to have some sort of relationship with them and understanding. And I love that. But Taami's lightsaber, this is just like the littlest detail that I think is so beautiful. Ugly as it was, her lightsaber, it served a perfect reflection of the great truth of the Force. No matter what a person was on the outside, everyone inside everyone was made of light. Oh, I love that.
I love it. I love it so much.
And I think with these two characters, we do get a little bit at the heart of each Jedi, and their philosophy that everybody's made of light, everybody is part of the Force, that, there's a lot of love despite the whole no attachments thing. There's a lot of love among all of these Jedi for one another, and a lot of care, and trust. And yeah, report them all to the council, disband the order. Maybe we'd be better off.
Well, when you talk about rule bending, especially around attachment, I think that leads me to our next relationship, which is Porter Engle and Indira Stokes. And specifically, Ember. Oh, who's a good girl. Ember. Yes, you are. Gonna scratch you behind your ear. Who just set that Nihil man aflame? Was it you? Yes, it was. Good girl. Oh my God. Can't believe I just got that soft over Ember on the podcast. Somebody clip that and use it as blackmail against me. But
I'll do it.
Please don't. Ember, when you talk about attachment, they make a joke about Ember, how she showed up to the building on Elphora, and Porter Engle and Indira found her there, and she was wounded. They took her in, they called her a team member, because you always have to take care of your team, and that's not necessarily forming an attachment. So I guess there's a little bit of a workaround there. So I do love how you're saying, like, all of these Jedi kind of do. Some of these Jedi, I think the rule is a little bit silly and they poke fun at it. So this is just like another example of that. Like, yeah, we brought her on and we made her a team member so we could keep her and love her so much and give her good ear scratches, especially when she saved Porter Engle and lit that guy up on fire. Like, it just says, quote,
literally,
Ember did not stop, just continued torching the Nihil until at first he stopped screaming and then he stopped moving. And then Porter scratches her ear and says, good girl. Very good girl. Isn't that the best thing in Star Wars you've ever read in your life? Come on.
Brad is a dog person and he is thrilled about the inclusion of a real Star Wars dog.
More Star Wars dogs.
I think that this whole, like, they called her a team member in order to kind of keep her around is so interesting, because it's one of the way that recognizes that this whole attachments rule is absurd, and everybody kind of knows it's absurd. And for, like, Tayami and Mikkel, they make a joke about it, and this relationship, they make a workaround. For Ava, Chris, and Elzar Mann, they know it's kind of crazy because they're sitting here both not talking to each other and just, like, denying their feelings. Mm-hmm. They should all go back in time and slap the Prime Jedis. Or whoever came up with this silly nonsense. It
really is silly, honestly. It's just it's nonsense. It bogs down decision making and judgment. That's all it really does in some ways.
Yeah, because you have to make decisions with care and love. Anyway,
let's talk about Porter. The Blade of Bardota. Porter?
The Blade of Bardota. Damn. We better find out what this means. Oh. But he has spent 300 years in the Old Order, so he's old. And he's, kind of like a Yoda or a Yariel Poof or Opa Ran
Cesis. Yeah.
I have no idea. It really hurts my brain.
We tried, honestly.
But he's somebody who's been around a lot and lived a lot of different lives. And he had been a teacher, an explorer, a diplomat, a warrior, a legend, among the Order, with that title of the Blade of Bardota. And that's really interesting because he's made a decision to kind of, like, just be this outpost Jedi and just, like, chill out on Elphorona, I think is how you say that, but I could be wrong. He's a cook. He just retired there on Elphorona. And I think you want to talk about Porter Engle.
I do.
So I'm going to let you pick up that thread.
I do want to talk about him. First thing I want to ask you, though, is would you eat his Porter's 9-egg stew?
No.
Really?
Yeah, it's 9 eggs.
But it's got that special Porter Engle love baked into it.
I get it, but, like, I'll eat another one of his special delicious meals. Not the 9-egg stew. That sounds kind of miserable. No offense to Porter Engle and his yummy cooking.
Okay, all right. We'll pretend we won't tell him. We don't want to offend Porter Engle. But Porter Engle is really fascinating to me. I like the idea that when a Jedi retires, they can choose to just live on Coruscant. But he specifically was like, I don't want to do that. I've been a teacher. I've been an explorer. I've been a diplomat, a warrior. I am kind of done being here. He's kind of the person that, grows up in one town, stays there for quite some time, and is like, I need to move out. I need to go somewhere. I need to try something new. And he is this just veteran Jedi who decides, I'm going to live on Elphrona as a sort of sheriff. He's going to settle disputes, defend towns, bring criminals to justice, teach children, offer medical assistance, help people. He's just going to help people. It's that simple, right? And I love him so much. He's kind of just got the mentality of, like, screw y'all, I'm going to go cook some random eggs and live on this mining planet forever. And that's just like, I love this energy, honestly. And when push comes to shove and the Blythes come into trouble and they have to go rescue him, which I wasn't. This storyline. This is probably like the only storyline in the book that dragged for me like a little bit, but I love when they're trying to rescue these farmers, and it describes him as a dormant volcano beginning to wake with unimaginable power. I'm like, dang, that's pretty cool. And he calls us Steely a luminous being. He's like, you are light and speed, and there's nothing in this world more beautiful. I'm like, that's a perfect line. It's beautiful stuff. And another thing too is when we talk about the Jedi viewing all living beings as valuable, he kills one of the Nihil snipers, and he thinks to himself, he, quote, regretted that a living, thinking being, a child of the Force, had made choices that brought him to such an end. A child of the Force. Everybody's a child of the Force, even the Nihil, right? So I think he's got a very like empathetic nature about him, and that he wants to help people. He's retired, so he'll give everybody a chance, but like also don't mess with the Blade of Bardota, because he'll kick your ass probably. Meanwhile, Indira Stokes, I didn't get as much from her in this book, hopefully more later on, but she's definitely like very technologically savvy, which I liked about her. And she's, driving the Vanguard, which, by the way, I love that like most of the Jedi vehicles, you have to like plug in your lightsaber as a sort of key.
It's absurd.
So
and
silly, but I love it. It's like such a Star Wars thing to happen. It's just like ridiculous, and I love it. But Indira Stokes, I love this whole gang. I love that they're all on Elfrona, and I would love to hear more about them. And I gotta say too, so happy the farmer mom Erica did not die. I was very worried for a second we were gonna lose yet another mom in Star Wars.
Oh man!
Thankfully, Indira was able to save her life. So let's pay some respects there as well. Indira saving another mom in Star Wars. Thank you so much.
Shout out! She also saves Belle when he's doing his jumpy folly landing thing when her and Belle's like, did Loden put you up to this to be at like the bottom? She's like, yeah. And I thought that was pretty funny. There's this kind of settled nature to that whole group that I like a lot. And kind of transitioning into another major relationship is Belle and Loden, master and apprentice. Well, Loden is master, Belle is the apprentice, and Belle is the one who has Ember. I love Belle. I really do. Shout out to Belle. But Loden is also amazing. He is he's like a dark green Twi'lek, and he looks very regal and also a little tough. And I don't know what to say about them. I got good vibes from this relationship, and I liked both of them, but I don't know how to talk about them. So Brad, I hope you do.
What I will say is they've got a very close-knit relationship, Belle and Loden. I think they are they're almost close to like Anakin and Obi-Wan in a way, minus the many immaturities of Anakin and the sort of tension that's there of jealousy. I think there's more of an endearing nature to the relationship, but that brotherhood is still very much intact. I think what really defines Loden's master philosophy is, if I do everything, no one learns anything. So he really wants to put Belle through what Belle describes as this sort of endless gauntlet of impossible tasks that push him to his limit. But he accepts it. He tries, and he keeps trying and trying and trying. And I think the common thread is the jump. He jumps down to Hetzel. He jumps down to Elfrona. And it's finally towards the end of the story that he makes the final jump and is able to land and use the Force in the way that he sees fit. And that's kind of that cool moment of like, yeah, he did it. Freeze frame, fists in the air.
Yeah. Yeah.
But there's also with brotherhood comes that attachment. I think there are some dark qualities to Belle potentially, because he talks about, the Force is this thing that he's able to tap into and feel as bright of a sun with so much light pouring out of him that he might go blind, right? And there's always this like little small light inside of him that never stops shining. But he says too, quote, from spark to inferno, any connection to the Force chased away the shadows. What are the shadows? So clearly it's like when he taps into the Force and experiences this light, he thinks it's chasing away some sort of shadow inside of him. So what does that look like? Does that mean the dark side is lingering inside of Belle? Is this going to bode well for Loden's capture at the end of this book? I think it's kind of one of those things where maybe we see the light snuffed out of Bel Zettifar. I mean, I think there is something.
I can't handle that.
There is something very specific about this phrasing and the fact that Bel Zettifar loses his master at the end of the book to the Nihil, and how is he gonna deal with that? You know, that's what I'm most excited for. Is he gonna dabble in the dark? We shall see. And we know,
well,
Sarah.
Yeah, well, I hope that he's gonna be good because I love him, and I love him on the cover of Rising Storm by Kevin Scott.
Yeah, he's one of the central figures of the book.
He's handsome. He's a Jedi. He's hanging out with other Jedi hotties, Stellan Gios. And I must say, this is a tangent. This is a tangent from our Bel and Loden comment. But the trio, we're going to talk about them in a minute. The trio of Avar, Elzar, and Stellan Gios. God bless them. They have some great genes.
Yeah.
Very beautiful people. That's it. All these Jedi are hot. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk. Another reason to read this book, even if you are cynical about the Jedi Order.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Now, I know Avar, Elzar, and Stellan are all very close-knit. They've been close-knit for quite some time. They're sort of like the three musketeers of sorts of the Jedi Order. But let's narrow it down. Let's get a little steamy up in this Friends of the Forest podcast to start 2021. I've watched Bridgerton, folks, and I will never be the same. Let's talk about Space Bridgerton, which is the romance of Avar Kriss and Elzar Mann. What are we dubbing the ship name for this? Is it Avzar?
Avzar.
Elzar? Actually, Elzar still works. But that's not fun.
Actually, Avzar kind of works. We'll workshop it.
How about Cran?
We'll tweet it out, see how people catch on.
Cran.
Krann.
Krann. And then we could draw like two little crayons holding hands.
You know what? Listeners, if you feel similarly to either the way that Brad or I do, which actually is quite different about this relationship. I do not see this as Space Bridgerton a lot at all.
I just want them to kiss.
Avzar or Cran or something else entirely. Let's workshop it. Let's talk about it. Let's have a conversation and come up with something. And we'll do it. Maybe we'll put out a poll. I don't know.
Listen, if you're listening and you're good at art, draw two crayons dressed in the white crayons dressed as the Jedi on the cover, so you have a reference point. But they're holding hands. And then just put the word Cran above it. Krann. If you do that and you tag Friends of the Force on Twitter, I will retweet it. I promise. Cran. Let's make it work. Let's make it work. Anyways, Sarah.
Anyway, either way you spin it, either way the cookie crumbles. We love Avar Kriss and Elzar Mann on this podcast.
It's a love story, baby. Just say yes.
And that's what they're missing because they're not talking about it.
Exactly. So, what are the background between these two? How far back do they go? And why, even though they work in a professional manner, there is definitely something unsaid beneath the surface for both of them. Also, did you expect romance in this book? Let me ask you that too.
To answer that question first before we go anywhere else, I don't know. I don't think so. You know, especially in that first part where we were just like action. Did not expect any kind of romance or pining or gazing or yada yada. And then we got it. And then I tweeted out as I was reading the book, I was like, I'm not going to say what it is, but I just found my favorite paragraph in this entire book. It's soft and inconsequential, and I love it. Anyway, we'll get on more on that in a minute. But Elzar is described as Avar's oldest, closest friend in the Order. She describes him as funny and clever, and they just got along. They're part of a trio with Stellan Gios who grew up and grew in rank together and are all kind of very close and have worked well together in the past. But clearly with a capital C, they have had something a little more going on in the past. And, thinking back, I mentioned it earlier, but Master and Apprentice, you think about, there's hints to secret old, I think, Qui-Gon relationship that he might have had at one point. And then when you think of like Clone Wars and Obi-Wan and Satine and that whole thing, Anakin and Padme, these Jedi are having relationships. But especially when you're young, when you're growing, and you're feeling lots of feelings, it seems like this was commonplace.
Yes.
Elzar suspected, this is on 375, Elzar suspected they were thinking about the same thing. Shared moments as Padawans, tolerated and understood and even common, but things to be left behind once one ascended to become an adult in the Order. They hadn't discussed these moments, not in a very long time, and never with more than an oblique reference, but they were never far away from each other's mind, especially when they were together.
Ooh,
Something
there.
Ooh.
There is something.
Does it mean that they kissed, having a secret relationship, exploring the Force together? And that I do not mean as a euphemism, but he talks about seeing the Force, seeing his own perception of the Force when she looks at him in her eyes. So who knows? Or maybe even getting it on. That I do mean exactly what you think it means. But they knew that once they reached their adulthood, that they had to give this up. And I think that's all very interesting and a little sad, because they knew that they could fool around or get away with something as a kid and feel the feelings that they wanted to feel and form those attachments, but that they couldn't. There was a point that they had to stop. But clearly they haven't stopped, because they're still thinking about it, which means it's not really in the past at all, ladies and gentlemen. It is in the present, and they love each other.
Yeah, those old feelings definitely do carry into the present day, because there is this professional relationship that's sort of baked into the romance there, and I think they try to use that professional relationship to like deny themselves of those feelings, right? Because we know Elzar is somebody that's trying to be on the council, but the council views him as this sort of Qui-Gon-like figure in a way, somebody that is frustrating to deal with because he'll never explain what he does or how he does it. But Avar just kind of accepts him for who he is. She never has to ask him why he does the things he does. But she also chooses him for these missions because she wants to help him in his eyes. She chose him because she wants to help him get elevated to the status of a Jedi Master. And it's funny, they have these moments where he tries to use the mind trick. It's commonly referred to as the mind touch. I think Elzar is a trendsetter because it becomes the Jedi mind trick, but like unanimously across culture in universe. And they have this sort of thing where like, he says, "Oh, you got me. I was going to use it there, but I won't." And they kind of smile at each other. And, they have the whole moment where they cool down the supercomputer together. And it says that Elzar felt something like exultation, joy in a difficult job doing something well. By two people connecting on a deep level without any need to explain each other about what they were doing. It had always been this way ever since their Padawan days. Their connection made things better, but if he was being honest with himself, it also made some things worse.
Let's be very clear. That some things is his heart.
And also, he's getting blue-balled. Like, this guy really just wants to have a good time with Avar. He just wants to kiss. He just wants to kiss her.
I just really have a totally different interpretation of this relationship.
Listen, I'm just trying to find some joy this week, and if it's the thought of Elzar Mann getting blue-balled. But no, really, real talk though, like this relationship, they do think of something, and like what better scene to have if you're talking romance, Sarah?
Yeah.
Than on Naboo.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
And not only on Naboo, they are literally at the lakeside, looking across the lake.
Darn right they are.
And what do they see? Varakino, Padme Amidala's house.
We hit my favorite paragraph. So if you saw my tweet many weeks ago at this point, and we're like, what is she talking about? Now this listener, this is on 175. She glanced at him. He looked good. Happy, his dark eyes shining, a grin lighting up his face, though that could be due to the drink in his hand, some green stuff in a stemless glass bowl. She didn't know what it was, but she knew Elzar, And so odds were it was the finest intoxicant their hosts had available. And considering their hosts, that meant that it was probably very fine indeed. When I tell you that I pretty much yelled upon reading this, I was like, I love it. What I love so much about this is like the gaze and the pining. But there's just like this gaze. She looks at him and she sees him as beautiful and happy and full and of the light, and that melted my soft little heart.
Yeah, and she's thinking of retirement and like life after being a Jedi, and she kind of revels in the thought of spending that time with Elzar. But it's not something she would ever tell him, she thinks, because he would just tease her about it, which, like, oh, so endearing. And
but
Sarah, I do want to make clear.
He wouldn't.
I do want to make clear. When I thirst over these two, like, I'm also completely in agreement with you. Like, this isn't a relationship about sexual desire. This is a relationship about comfort and care and a quiet presence of contentment, like you said.
Yeah. Those are my
It is that. But let's get Star Wars steamy.
Yeah. Okay. Well, if we're gonna talk about Star Wars steamy, we're just kind of going all over the place at this point. But
yeah.
Oh, I'm gonna tangent. If we're talking about Star Wars steamy, I'm going to talk about the Jedi romances.
Oh, yes.
Vel is reading. She's like, he read a few. They were all set on outposts on far Republic frontiers, full of unrequited love and longing glances. Like, shit, this is the shit that gets me real good. Like I live for the longing and then the hurt. I don't know what that says about me. Anyway, full of unrequited love and longing glances. The only action was the lightsaber battles that were clearly a substitute for what the characters really wanted to do. I love that. That was when I tell you that was like really thrilling to read, I really do mean it. Like, that was so unexpected, like in the first 25 pages of the book, and so much fun to read. I want those. Wow. Okay, yeah. The unrequited love, longing glances. Ouch. They don't get steamy at all. In fact, they get like everything but the steam. But I loved that quote. I think it was great. And you said like, oh, I didn't realize this was going to be foreshadowing until it was, And I also agree with you. I love me some steamy romances. I'm not going to say I don't, because I do.
When I say space Bridgerton, I watched Bridgerton. There are a lot of moments on that show, even though it does get like super, super maturely steamy in certain parts. There's also like a lot of just like longing glances and like hand holding and some of those like smaller, intimate showings of love. So when we go to the end of the book, when they're kind of taking their stroll through the Starlight Beacon, it says here, quote, "Those times, many years in the past, seemed very present just then. Avar stopped. It took Elzar a step to realize she wasn't keeping pace, and he turned back to look at her. He raised an eyebrow. She held out her hand. He took it. He held up, looked at it, then looked at Avar Kriss, his friend. The look she gave him was like that sea he found inside himself, the Force, deep and endless and impossible to fully comprehend. You could drown in it. 'We are Jedi,' he said. 'We are,' she replied. She looked away and let go of his hand, and he was no longer drowning, but perhaps some part of him wished he was." So if there's any indication of what is, like, if you miss all the other parts of this book between them, you cannot read that sentence and not realize. I think for anybody that might not have realized it, that was when they were like, whoa. Because, it's the, we are Jedi. We are. And it's kind of that thing of like, we know what we both want, but we know we're both Jedi. But then there's also kind of like the, we are Jedi. Maybe we can just do this anyways. It shows that Elzar is like, I want to keep drowning in the sea of the Force with you.
But Avar thinks that thought is really silly. And like, she won't talk to him about it because she thinks that's really silly. And
she thinks he will think it's really silly too. But like, he's feeling like the same way. That's the irony of it.
I don't know. I guess I just really like it when a knife is just shoved into my chest and twisted and twisted, because that's what this is. And I live for it. So I could talk about these guys all day. We literally pretty much have two pages of notes,
yeah,
on them specifically. But I think the bottom line is, like, they better be allowed to have a happy ending.
Agreed.
And
plot
if they're
twist,
not,
they move into Padme's home on Naboo. That would be great.
If they're not able to have a happy ending, I will be crushed. And part of me expects that they're not gonna be able to have that happy ending. But, like, oh my god, imagine if they were. Like, just that would fulfill my soul. So this is another direct notice to the High Republic creative team. Cran / Avzar is endgame.
Cran is the new Reylo.
Cran is the new Reylo.
Let the past die. The Skywalker saga, done. Over with. We have moved beyond the need for the Skywalker saga. We are full on Cran stands. Oh my god.
We just
blew my own mind.
That's it. Oh my god. First of all, oh my god. Second of all, oh my god. Third of all, oh my god. Fourth of all, I don't know if every Reylo fan is going to be into this, because this is a lot more like friends to lovers than it is enemies to lovers if we're talking tropes. But I am a sucker for a friends to lovers romance. So that's just who I am. And just like everything. I don't know. They deserve happy endings, and I am a Cran stan.
Cran stans unite. Oh god, I can't wait till we're kind of past the spoiler phase and we can just start posting Cran stan. Oh god. Wait, Cranston? Bryan Cranston? Is Bryan Cranston gonna play Elzar Mann on the High Republic? I'm gonna stop myself.
That was some, like, big brain, amazing work. But Bryan Cranston is, like, I want to say, like, 25, 30 years older. Maybe like
older retired Elzar Mann.
There you go. All
living on Naboo with Avar Kriss.
We figured it out. We figured out the secret.
By the way, the Jodie Whittaker Avar Kriss fan casting is the only fan casting I will accept at this point in time.
I've seen some other ones that I like as well, so I'm not going to settle into one at this moment.
I just love her doctor. It's just so good. It's so good. I still got to watch the holiday special. But anyways, we are going to move on from Cranston to the world much beyond the Republic, much beyond the Jedi. In fact, these people hate the Jedi. We are going to talk about the Nihil in our final part here before we wrap everything up. So we wanted to devote an entire section to the Nihil because they are being ushered in as the new baddies of Star Wars. And when you ask yourself why are the Nihil, or who are the Nihil, I think really the biggest thing with them is they have been described as like Vikings, but Vikings had a code of honor and the Nihil don't. And the unique thing about the Nihil is they're set up with the Eye of the Nihil, who is Marchion Ro, and then you have his Tempest runners, who are Pan Eta, who's a Dewutin, Lorna D, who's a Twi'lek, and Kasab, who's a Weequay. And these are his 3 Tempest runners. And any decisions that are made for the Nihil are made by these 4. Any split decisions, tie goes to Marchion. And really, they just love living in the Outer Rim. They love living there and having freedom to do whatever they want. The Republic hasn't encroached on their space just yet with their law and order. And they love just being marauders. And they have the special ability of the paths. It's what allows them to make micro jumps. They can go inside gravity wells or enter hyperspace from anywhere they want. They're kind of like spirits. They can just appear at will with the 3 lightning strike symbol on their ships and kind of strike fear in the heart of anybody. Within the Nihil too, they're just these savage people. I didn't expect this from them, but like pay the price. You join the Nihil thinking you're gonna have freedom, but like once you're in, you kind of have a boot on your chest the entire time. It's like fall in line or pay the price. You'll get thrown out into the the Great Void, or you'll get your throat cut by a vibroblade. So they're pretty savage, and all the spoils go up to the Tempest Runners in the Eye. It's kind of like weird to think that they structure themselves where they carry out these jobs, but the rewards go up to the top.
Mm-hmm.
It's a very capitalist group for a group that wants freedom. It's interesting. It's very interesting.
Yeah, they're a group that want freedom, but exist within a lot of strict structure and strict hierarchical structure, which is like, is that freedom?
Right.
Let's ponder on that thought. Let's use our big brains. But oh man, they are very interesting also because they are frauds in a way. Their whole order, their whole organization is built on a lie, which makes somebody like Martian Rowe very interesting. And I will say that when I'm reading this book, there's no doubt that the Nihil are really complex, fascinating, exciting villains. But I will admit, and I hang my head in shame, that when I was reading sections about the Nihil, I was wondering when we were going to go back to the Jedi because I love them. So the Nihil are like not my wheelhouse, and but like they fascinate me, and like no space. I don't have anything to say about it, but like no space.
Yeah, the kind of the great beyond where they're hiding. It is really, really interesting, honestly. But I think this history of the Nihil, and like you said, they're built on a lie. So what does that mean exactly? So when we look at Martian Rowe, he inherited the Nihil from his dad, Asgar Rowe, who was the custodian of the paths. He was murdered by Kassav, I believe. And by the way, he has a Kashyyyk Warsher tree in his cockpit on the Gaze Electric, which got to appreciate a man with style. Just got to say that. But
so interesting.
He's very Kylo Ren in a way, in terms of he wears a mask. I don't know if he's necessarily got as much of a heartful side or like a redemptive side, or at least I just haven't seen it yet. But we really see him kind of take a turn for the worse towards the end of this book.
Mm-hmm.
I think he starts out a little more empathetic, and you can kind of sense there's a bit of a struggle internally with him. But by the end of the book, he's just kind of full blown crazy and like willing to sacrifice Kassav and throw him into a trap so that he can get the Republic off his back, right? He's willing to kill one of his own people in the line of duty and lie to his entire people about it and say that, Kassav went into a trap. I didn't set up the trap. It was him that ran into it. So, I think the heart of Martian is he has a long-standing history, his family, with the Jedi. We don't know what that is yet exactly, but Asgar wanted to use the paths for redemption and revenge for his family. But even though he never got to see that come to fruition, he passed that on to his son, and now Martian wants the Nihil not to really be the selfish, ravaging, disorganized band of criminals that they are currently, but they need to evolve because the Republic is starting to encroach on their territory. My territory, as Martian says it is. And I think I definitely get the Kylo Ren vibes of like, finish what my grandfather started, right? Finish what my father started. And even though the Eye can't act, the Eye sees, and he uses the paths through what we find out is Marie Santeca, which is crazy, which we haven't talked about the Santecas yet. I know we had them earlier in our outline, but now we can kind of talk about where the paths actually come from and the idea of hyperspace, and that's the hyperspace advantage is what really sets the Nihil apart. So do you want to talk about the Santecas and kind of what their family history is and how Marie fits into it?
Yeah. So when I heard that we were going to get like some Ancestors of Legacy characters, I was like, do we really need that? And it turns out that there's some of the most interesting and exciting kind of elements of it. And I am specifically also talking about Avon Steros from A Test of Courage. I love her. I would die for her. But in this book, we have the Santeca clan, the Santecas, who essentially made bank being prospectors and finding routes through wild space. And not everybody could do this successfully. Many people tried and then got lost, in space. Horrifying. But they became one of the wealthiest families in the entire galaxy because they sold their routes to people, governments, organizations for profit. You can use our routes, you can have our routes if you pay us a pretty penny. So, they now continue to do this work as like quote unquote hyper surveyors to find new paths, but it's something that it's quoted as like hyperspace being its own plane of existence.
That's crazy to me.
So,
I hadn't thought of it that way, right? It's like it's you're entering another bubble of space-time.
Yeah. And again, what I find to actually be really exciting about this, and I'm tangenting, but bear with me for a moment, is the kind of the way it feels kind of Star Trek-y in a good way. Like, I like that because it feels a little bit more sci-fi than like fantasy. And I like that it's being rooted in the sci-fi, but like in Star Trek Discovery, they work through this mycelial network, which is a way for them to move in space-time as well, and they like jump, from place to place. And this feels similar in a way. Like, yeah, when you go into that space, you're not in the same dimension essentially that you were in before, which is really interesting, and that you can get lost in that plane of space that doesn't exist in normal space-time. So the Santecas are really key in this, and one of their family members, Mari, you call her Marie, I call her Mari, different, same thing, same person. To me, Mari is really interesting because she was captured as a child, or taken,
6 years old.
Yes, presumed to be dead to the Santecas that Elzar and Avar visit, until they essentially tell them what's up. And Asgar Ro and Marchian Ro have been manipulating and abusing her since her childhood to give them more paths. And now she is frail and old and on her deathbed. And Marchian is still like dragging paths out of her despite her own health.
And he's not even using these paths right now. He's saving them for later because he knows once she dies, it's like his power as the eye is kind of gone. So he has to retain those paths because that's kind of the only thing that's been keeping him alive this much. Because people know, like, we can't get the paths without Martian, but we want to all kill Martian because we kind of hate the guy, honestly.
Yeah, and they don't know that he's not the one in power. Mari Santeca has been kept away from everybody for decades upon decades. A secret that has been kept between Asgar and Martian and the members of the crew of the Gaze Electric, more or less. And first of all, Gaze Electric is a great ship name. That's all I have to say. But when I read this and realized what was happening here, it's horrifying. And it kind of hints at some of the later atrocities that the Nihil engage in, such as like jumping. Like when Mari gives them the paths and Cassiv's ships are now on war paths, essentially, and they're jumping into the Republic ships and exploding them from the inside and like on suicide missions. Horrifying stuff. Just terrifying and unthinkable and scary. And the fact that they have been treating Mari this way for her entire life is devastating and inhumane and awful. And I think if anything in the Nihil stuck out to me, it was that. And shit sucks. Like, that's awful.
Well, and to the fact that Martian is making her feel like she's serving some sort of benefit, saying that, hey, you're selling these to the Republic or whatever government that your mind makes up in your head at this point in time.
Yeah.
And, she's happy. She's content. even though she's basically living in a medical pod, right, and against her own will in some senses. I almost thought of Echo from the Clone Wars, which I know you haven't watched the Clone Wars, but for those of you who remember what Echo looked like when he was found, I kind of thought back to that. And I love the fact that like Marlo and Velis, when they meet with Elzar and Avar, Avar and Elzar can kind of sense they're not giving everything up about hyperspace and their secrets and what they know, because they're kind of starting to understand, well, if the Legacy run, if something crashed into it in hyperspace, it has to be our sister, right? It has to be, she's the only one that could know possibly how to jump across hyperspace into an object in another part of space-time. And they know, they note on page 180, strange things happen psychologically when you're out in space. We have stories from our family's history you wouldn't believe. Madness creeps in before you know it. And she got these abilities when she traveled out into the outer regions of hyperspace, and that's where it all began. So it is a tragic story, and it is so awful and heartbreaking to think of this, like, woman propping up this man, and he's getting all the spoils, but like she's kind of living on life support against her own free will. And the Nihil represent freedom, yet they've taken it away from this one person, right? So that's the type of thing where it's like, usually I like to sympathize with villains, and I'm finding it really hard in some ways with the Nihil because they are so savage. They have no code. They have no. They don't believe in anything. Like we've heard repeatedly over and over and over again. So I'm wondering, like, who is going to be the person that breaks ranks? Who's going to be the person that we can sympathize with, right? And I think Martian. Again, there were elements of it there, but by the end of the book, he's just out of his mind crazy. I mean, he's wearing the cloak of his dad again. He's requesting everybody to bring him more Nihil, as many as you can. I will give you everything. He hates the Republic. He wants to basically take everything and make it his. And, his family long ago learned the costs of what the Jedi can do and how they can invade and instill their own rules and laws. And I want to know more about that especially, but he is just on a path of revenge right now, and I don't think there's any stopping him. He's really far in deep.
Yeah.
I will say too, Sarah, we haven't talked about Kevin Tarr, but when you think of Mary Tekka as like the Niles version of hyperspace mapping, Kevin Tarr is like the Republic's.
Yes.
They're kind of the two hyperspace savvy experts in a way. But I just want to shout out Kevin Tarr real quick. Really the MVP. He used 57,000 Navi droids to figure out an algorithm to see where the emergencies would be happening. He sliced hyperspace. What a guy.
Like when Bill Nye was on Dancing with the Stars, and now we are gifted, the internet has this incredible gif of Bill Nye just going, "Science!" and he's like shaking his arms above his head. That's what I feel like this whole thing with Kevin Tarr is like. It's him doing all the math and the science, and together they found the algorithm. Like, it's exciting. It's exciting.
I just think like the fact that Kevin Tarr became the Ministry of Technology on Hetzel before 25, like, what are we doing? What are we doing?
What am I doing with
my
life? Jeez.
Right? Jesus. But he had like a lot of really great advancements for Hetzel society, and he thinks of things in terms of like systems and rules, and if you can learn those things, you can start to instill change. And I would love for him to show up in future books, and I would just be curious, what his knowledge could bring to the table up against Mary for the Nihil, and like what it's like kind of like a game of chess, right?
Yes.
And Mary and Kevin are kind of the big players. Even though the Jedi are going to sense some things, Kevin has this ability that even like a living being or a droid sometimes can't comprehend. And he's just really got a knack for it. And I'm excited to see if they ever communicate with each other. Imagine like some just like crazy battle and like they're communicating somehow. I don't know. My mind goes places.
That's a really interesting thought.
I don't know. Who knows? Who knows? But do you have any other thoughts on the Nihil before we kind of get into what I think is Martian's endgame and what the future could look like for these stories and the shadows that loom?
I don't know if I have any other thoughts about the structure of the Nile. Like, I think it's really interesting, and it did feel a little bit like a lot. Like, a little bit like a lot in terms of understanding the structure and what's happening with the Nile, but I hope we'll get more clarity of that as these books go on and as their endgame, specifically Marcian's endgame, gets revealed. My final thought with the Nile, though, is I can't get through this episode without mentioning Wet Bub.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, Wet Bub is a Gungan.
Wet Bub.
Why does he have his nickname as Wet Bub? Well, one time he came out of a battle literally covered in blood. And what the fuck, Charles Soule? It's the best. It's the best. I don't know what it is, but that character, this very side character on the bridge of one of the Nile ships, is just incredible. I don't know how that came to his mind as like, I gotta write this guy, but it's the worst. And by the worst, I do mean the best.
Rest in peace, Wet Bub, because I think he dies with Kassav in the final battle.
Does he?
Yeah, I think so. Which, by the way, Kassav, I mean, the fact that he like destroyed an entire planet, little did he know that planet was just full of people who loved revenge and justice and blood and honor and would just basically duel or poison anybody they could. And they show up with Governor Veen at the end, and I was just like, oh my god, they never forgot. I thought that was pretty epic, by the way, when they came in at the end and were like, hey, yeah, remember us? Yeah, Kassav, we're gonna board you now, and you're not gonna like it.
You're like, I'm not very nice, and I'm not going to play niceties with you.
Play stupid games, Kassav. You win stupid prizes.
Yeah.
So this leads us to our final part here of the episode, which is what's next. The shadow looms over the High Republic era. So Chancellor Soule has authorized hyperspace travel again. They think that they've won, but there are some doubts over, I think it was Kevin Tarr or Larilia, who was the transportation secretary, who pitched the idea that maybe this isn't the end of the Nile. Maybe there's more to this. And, I got to also mention too, Senator Izzet Noor, who's from Sereno. He's a major spokesman for the Outer Rim territories. And the whole time he was just like, wow, open up the hyper lanes, please. That's all I'll comment on that. But he's just annoying and complains all the time. But so that's what's going on with the Republic. Where the Nile, they have a Jedi now. We see Marcian just kill Otto Blythe with the lightsaber. He's just like, oh, this guy? Done. I'm just like, okay.
I didn't need him.
Crazy. And there's this really interesting discussion that happens at the end of the book between Loden Greatstorm and Marcian. And Marcian basically says, listen, the worst is yet to come. And like, I'm about to use you because the Jedi is exactly what I needed. Because he blames the Jedi for what happened to his ancestors. And he takes out this 3-handed long carved piece of something. It has symbols on it, screaming faces, fire, and chains. It glows purple when it's touched, and he blames this thing specifically for what happened to his ancestors. So it's some sort of tool or ancient relic that he's recovered, and he's going to use to wreak havoc, which the havoc that is supposedly going to be unleashed upon the Jedi is what Elzar senses. You want to take us through Elzar's vision here to wrap up?
Yeah, I will. Before we do that, I just want to say that like this, it says it, it looks like it was once reforged. It's old. It's ancient. It has a history. As somebody who loves relics, I find relics really interesting. This is exciting. Moving into Elzar's vision. So we talked earlier about Elzar and Avar and the ways in which they're talking to one another at the end. You're like, oh, it's so soft and good. Just say your feelings out loud and maybe you'll get somewhere. Avar leaves and everything goes to shit. For Elzar sees mutilated Jedi, things that lived in the dark, in the deep, fleeing, screaming a warning or prophet at him, shearing through his consciousness. He starts to bleed from his nose. Like, this did not feel like an unknowable, avoidable vision of the future. It felt inevitable, certain. Evil horror was sweeping across the galaxy like the tide. He sees fear. He sees unknown. He sees the Jedi's greatest enemy, which is fear. And it's really ominous because I want Elzar and Avar to have a happy ending. Anyway.
Yeah. And we know they're getting split up too. They're kind of going separate ways on different missions. So
yeah, but this reminds me of some of the stuff what we saw in like Dooku Jedi Lost, with Sifo Dyas,
yep,
who was one seeing like incredibly violent visions of the future.
Yes, I wonder if he has a similar power then.
Yeah,
yeah.
And
it's
this
a good connection.
It overtakes him, and he sees this, knowing it's coming, and I don't want him to feel pain.
Yeah, and when we go back to our thoughts earlier about the Nihil being the soup, salad, and breadsticks at the Olive Garden, whatever this is the whole menu, of entrees at Olive Garden.
Yeah, it's the taste of Italy.
Something is about to be unleashed, and I think it might even be separate from whatever this glowing purple rod is that Martian has. It might be connected. It might be the thing that catalysts all of these other events. But who knows? I think when you look at a book called The Rising Storm as a continuation of the story, we're going to learn more about what was this vision about. What is Martian's next steps? How does Bell Zettifar react to Loden getting captured? Who is the monster hunter known as Ty York? She's gonna have to hunt some monsters down that are maybe in these visions, the ones that are coming out of the dark. And then you have Stellan Gios, who's one of the big Jedi names we haven't really interacted with yet. So I mean, there's a lot here, and I'm excited to see like where we go. But again, the future looks bright for these stories, and it's really hard to speculate, right? Because it's easy to speculate when it's a time period we know and have some context around, but I seriously don't know what's next. And that's actually pretty cool because I haven't really felt that way about Star Wars. I don't think it's as predictable, right? I don't think it's predictable. It's not predictable in the sense that, the Mandalorian, what episodes are going to go where, or the Skywalker saga, how it's going to end. The sandbox is open and we're just kind of here for the ride, and that's fun.
Yeah, and I think we're far enough away from the end of this time period, the High Republic, that it does feel wide open. Like, I think we have some vision of like what's coming in the continued first kind of wave of books. Like, we know that we're going to get these creatures because that was something that was talked about in one of the panels, that they're going to be kind of introduced into the dark. We know that they're kind of unkillable and plant-like and all that good stuff, and we know that like the Jedi are probably not going to fare so well, some of them. And we've got a lot of books coming to explore that in. So that's really exciting as well.
Yeah. Sarah, what are some of those books? We got a ton of new reveals at the High Republic panel, so kick us off.
All right. We've got Kevin Scott's The Rising Storm out this summer. Justina Ireland's Out of the Shadows, her first YA in the Star Wars universe, coming out this summer, which includes, I believe, Reath and Vernestra Rowe from Reath from Into the Dark, Vernestra from A Test of Courage, and a new character. Daniel Jose Older's Race to Crash Point Tower, which is a middle grade. We've got Kevin Scott and Rachel Stott's Monster of Temple Peak. And we've got Justina Ireland and Shima Shinya's The Edge of Balance, which is going to be the start of a new manga series, which is so exciting. The manga adaptations of Lost Stars and there's another one that they've done, I believe. Legends of Luke Skywalker have been really, really cool. So I'm looking forward to seeing...
They did Rebels too, I think.
Oh, Rebel.
Yeah.
I'm gonna have to find it and read it. Have been really good. The Lost Stars one is excellent. So I'm looking forward to that as well. And then we've got something that Claudia's working on that she can't tell us about. So there's like a lot coming in the pipeline for us to dig into and really get to know this world. And, you know, despite something like The Rising Stormer and Out of the Shadows are a bit vague, but Race to Crash Point Tower, The Monster at Temple Peak, those kind of give us some very clear cut, like, there's going to be a monster at Temple Peak. They're going to race to Crash Point Tower. You know, it gives us a little hint of what's to come, but we really don't know. We don't really know. It's exciting.
Yeah. And Race to Crash Point Tower is going to be focused on one of the other great works, which is the Republic Fair.
Oh.
So that'll be pretty neat. But you and I have theorized, Cavan Scott said, you know, Rising Storm is the next in the series. So when I think of that, I really do think that when you look at the phases of the High Republic, I think you and I guess there's either going to be 2 to 3 books per phase, adult books like from
major
Del Rey. Major
yeah.
Del Rey releases, yeah. And Claudia didn't say what she was writing next. She's the only one we don't know anything about. My best guess is she will write the next adult book after Cavan. That will either be the finisher for phase 1 or it will be the start of phase 2. I just don't know if it's going to be 2 or 3 books. I would think maybe like a trilogy per phase would make sense to me.
That makes sense to me, but you know, who knows? They could be doing way more than that.
Because we know phase 1 goes into 2021, so maybe like, you know, book number 3 of phase 1 is January, first week of January, just like Light of the Jedi, and it's like the final book written by Claudia Gray. And then we start phase 2, like, you know, in the summertime when Cavan's book came out. So I think that's kind of where Del Rey specifically is going. I think when we look back on all 3 phases of the High Republic, we're going to have like this epic 9-book saga, which, like, listen, I always thought trilogies were cool for Del Rey and Star Wars Publishing, but if we're talking about a 9-book epic that rivals something on like a Game of Thrones level in terms of just like the breadth of storytelling and like the scope, that is why I'm investing in the High Republic. That is why I'm here reading these books. That's why we're here going on our longest episode ever for Friends of the Force 3 hours later.
I'm so sorry, Brad. I'm so sorry. Hopefully now that we've set the groundwork, none of our episodes will be this long again.
But I'm happy though. Like, we're here. We talked 3 hours about the High Republic because we love it. We love what we've read, and we want all of you to be just as passionate about it because, like we said, very, very upfront, is there's something for everybody in here. I promise you. I promise you, if you give it a chance, and maybe there isn't something for you, but I would at least give it a chance because I think you will at least pull some sort of redemptive qualities from it, some sort of silver lining that you will enjoy and attach yourself to. And I don't think it's necessary to read everything. I think you can read just what you want to read, and if you like a certain character, you can follow their journey throughout the High Republic. So much to come, Sarah. I'm very excited about this era. How are you feeling? How are you feeling 3 hours later?
I'm feeling so good. We can do the follow-up podcast right now, all about Avar and Elzar.
Oh my god!
Hashtag Cranstans.
Hashtag Cranstan. Oh my god. I don't want to spoil it for anybody, but yeah. Once we unleash that Pandora's box, we're gonna start the hashtag. So
yeah.
That about wraps it up, though, Sarah, for our episode on Light of the Jedi. So thank you for joining me for so long. It's crazy that we talked about it for this long, but I'm very, very happy about it. To wrap up, where can our listeners find you online?
You can find me at SEH221 on Twitter and Instagram, and on Goodreads and Letterboxd. I love writing reviews and talking about the books I read, so Goodreads. That's what I'm plugging in 2021.
Yes. And as for Friends of the Force, you can find us on Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. Make sure if you're listening to this episode to share it everywhere, retweet, like it. Leave us a 5-star rating if you can. Anytime the podcast is shared, it brings other people into the Friends of the Force community and lets them know about our show. And it just helps us a lot with that iTunes podcast algorithm. You can also join our Patreon at patreon.com/Friends of the Force, where if you want to hear my thoughts on the High Republic comics, you'd have to subscribe over there and get more on that. Thank you to our current patrons, Adam, Anna, Cheryl, Christina, Deborah, Donnie, Elegy, Jesse, Heroes of the Galaxy, Levi, Marie Claire, Marvin, Neil, Rachel, Sarah, and T. And our newest patrons, Brian, Lindsay, and Knights of Ren. So thank you all for being Friends of the Force patrons. You are absolutely the best. And Sarah, that is it. We've made it. We've covered Light of the Jedi. We've done it. It's good. Now we can put it on our bookshelf and wait for The Rising Storm by Cavan Scott. I can't wait. Only 5 more months.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
But hey, the next Del Rey novel that we're getting is Victory's Price by Alexander Freed.
Guys. Okay. Oh boy, maybe you should expect another 3-hour episode on that one.
Yeah, that might be like close to 4 hours. But listen, if you
we really love it.
If you liked this book discussion, Sarah is always my go-to for books on Friends of the Force, as just many other episodes in general. So you should just check out some of our other episodes if you read a book about Star Wars and you liked it. See if we covered it on the podcast, and we'll be covering all of the major publishing reveals and releases going forward. So stay tuned. Very exciting stuff for 2021. So I'm very excited. Sarah, thank you once again for joining me. For everybody out there, as always, thank you for listening and being a friend of the Force. And until next time, may the Force be with you always.
Bye.